So this week, I'd say we have about a mid-range of emails to get to with respect to feedback. It's we're getting into like the dog days of summer, right? New movies are out, but we're still distanced from the comic book movie stuff. Although Superman is still top of discussion, definitely with respect to the digital release and continued box office numbers. I think it's going to cross 600 million, something like that. Today, we also had a bit of sad news on this particular day that I'm recording this episode, the passing of Terrence Stamp, the original cinematic General Zod, and also Chancellor Valorum from The Phantom Menace, Star Wars, and many other roles and whatnot. So, RIP to him, rest in peace, definitely, no doubt about it. I might post something about it later. But yeah, just some general feedback this week, so tell you what, let's dive headfirst into it. Starting, of course, with John R., who leads us off with a couple of emails. This first one titled, Ideas of the Future and More. Gemini says, John R. shared updates on his cosplay performances and convention experiences and asked 4 questions about DCU box office potential, relationship history, personal relationship challenges, and favorite films from major franchises. All right, so per usual, some personal stuff and also some regular business stuff with respect to movies, TV, and other sort of media. All right, let's see what he's got. Quick responses he starts off with from last week and a recap of MagWest convention panel, CWF Magnitude. He says only 2 shows would get me to join your Patreon for 5 years. The first 3 seasons of SpongeBob and the first SpongeBob movie and Dragon Ball / Dragon Ball Z. Oh, well, sorry to hear that. Not really big on either of those shows, but it is what it is. It's all subjective. He says, a few weeks back, I said I would be rejoining CWF for the first time in almost 6 years. The first time was MagWest 2019 when you saw me as Dr. Eggman, and a month later I played Walter White / Heisenberg, a month later at Anime Destiny 2019. My Ron Nasty cosplay, accompanied by June Fang, played by my girlfriend, didn't advance, but they said that they were impressed by my performance so much they wanted me to try it again in 2 weeks for another con. Thank God registration is free when you participate, otherwise we'd be broke by now. He sent a Twitch link for it, said that they got on around the 18-minute mark. Interestingly enough, he said I was the only performer that had a valet this time around. The rest of the show was cool. He says, my friend Rob portrayed Raphael from Baldur's Gate. There was also a Zach Fair from Final Fantasy, Armstrong from Full Metal Alchemist, a furry character that liked to eat, and also a humanoid version of the Pokemon Haunter. Ironically, 2 original characters were the final 2, he said. Corporate Puppet, who was just a lady with a hand puppet parodying Vince McMahon, and a man with a box head with faces, and a dick in a box who ended up winning. Okay, Dick in a Box, that's the old SNL sketch, right? That's Timberlake and Sandberg. Yeah, Christmas sketch. I think, or maybe Christmas around the first time I saw it. He says the rest of the con was pretty good. I even got to play the Virtual Boy for the first time in years and got to play Atari, Super Mario games, Super Smash Melee, Guitar Hero, an indie 8-bit game. It's a video game convention. Also a cool tabletop that's heavily inspired by Super Nintendo game covers. All right. Fair enough. Sounds like it was a fun event, John. Glad it worked out for you. He says, as for NC-17, I think the reason I brought it up is because with how popular superhero and comic book movies are, it would be interesting to see if it's something that can be pulled off as a marketing strategy. It would be interesting if it can break a record. Yeah, I still don't think that they're ever going to do that because there's still just a connotation around NC-17 that studios desperately want to avoid. So yeah, I don't see that happening at all. And no one has suggested it. There's been no thoughts about it. And I feel like the way the culture is today, like, if anything, we're going to be moving further away from NC-17 because people just associate that, right or wrong, they associate it with sexual stuff. They associate it with very inappropriate stuff that, you can't even see. Like anything that, like, tests the legalities of what you're able to see, and instead of just, like even further than somebody under 17 trying to see an R-rated movie, right? Even, like, beyond that, because you can at least still attend that with a parent. I don't know that you can do that even with NC-17. In fact, I don't think you can. So, yeah, I don't see that happening at all, John. I think NC-17 is a radioactive rating, and the studios are never going to do anything with it if they can help it. I'll stick by that. He says, also going forward, I think to make things easier for you, I'm just going to send 2 official Flight Chat emails, with a third one being optional or just breaking news. They will usually be the shortest emails I send. either way. That's probably that's probably pretty efficient, I guess, is the best word that I can say for that. So cool. Either way, that'll work. So here, let's get to the four questions that you had in this first email. First question. He says this is irrelevant as to whether or not I want this to happen. But if we ever get to the first big DC Justice League type team up in the DCU, given that this Superman managed to make more than BVS domestically in just 1 month, that does indicate that eventually a DC film will become Warner Brothers' highest grossing film of all time. Not necessarily the highest grossing film of all time, but right now, they're the only major studio that doesn't have a film in the top 10 highest grossing films list. Paramount co distributed Titanic with Fox. I have a feeling, he says, if all these DCU films won so many people over, I think there is the slight chance that we get a DC movie in the top 10 all time greats. Most likely, it'll be something akin to Justice League, maybe Justice League International, I don't know, but let's see how well Supergirl and Clayface do. Do you see the potential for DCU getting a top 10 box office hitter? I truthfully don't care if they do or not because I don't buy into scoreboard mentality like that, but I mean, the potential is always there. I think, truthfully, it depends on how you're looking at the ranking. Like, if you're looking at just domestic or if you're looking at, like worldwide, right? So, is that what you're saying? Were you saying worldwide or were you saying period? If we look at the numbers here, right? And I've got Box Office Mojo up here. We look at top lifetime grosses, right? We're looking at worldwide lifetime gross. The top 10, starting from number 10, which is the first Jurassic World film, right? That's 1.67 billion. 653 million of that was domestic. Over a billion of that was foreign, right? Like international. Okay, so that's your lowest on the ladder, right? So that means that in order to get into the top 10 of worldwide lifetime gross, you have to have had at least have to have made at least $1 billion internationally. That might be a tall order going forward. It really might be a tall order. And even if you go further down, like, but if we go further down this list, right? Like, I'm scrolling all the way down. I'm trying to find the lowest, like, international number with respect to, and I have to get all the way down to 46, and that's Rogue One, a Star Wars story that made 525.1 million just internationally, $1 billion, like total, but that's the lowest you can get to be in like the lifetime gross and not have to rely on international in that regard. That's if you're talking about global numbers, right? For people who are just curious, as far as the top 10 global numbers, Jurassic World is 10th, 1.6 billion. Inside Out 2 is 9, 1.69 billion. Then you got Spider-Man No Way Home at 8, 1.9 billion. Avengers Infinity War at 7, little over 2 billion. Episode 7, Force Awakens, Star Wars, that's a little over 2 billion. This new film, this animated film that's about to be released here in the States, Neja 2, which is a Chinese animated film, that's at 2.1 billion, right? And the hilarious part about this, 2.1 billion worldwide lifetime gross, 20.8 million domestic. Like, it, again, when I tell people that this is how the landscape has changed internationally and that China is focusing more on their own films, this is like the poster child for that, right? So all the people making the silly ass box office arguments about international, this is why. Movies like Neja 2 are being promoted by China like much more heavily now than they were before with respect to US imports in that regard. So that is a big part of this with respect to that. That's fifth on the list, fifth all time in worldwide lifetime gross, or a film that has made the 99.9% of its money not in the United States. How about that, huh? And then your top four is the four that we know, right? Titanic fourth, Avatar: The Way of the Water third, Avengers Endgame second, Avatar first, right? Avatar top spot at 2.9 billion, Avengers Endgame 2.79 billion, Avatar: Way of the Water 2.3 billion, Titanic 2.2 billion, right? So James Cameron, of course, dominating the top four, right? He's got three of the four films in that regard, right? And Avengers Endgame, of course, massive event film. But do I see a DCU film getting that far? It depends. I don't know. And I think what it's going to come down to, truthfully, like it's got to be international. Like clearly, you have to make at least $1 billion international in order to be in this category, and or you've got to do something that hasn't been done. Because here, like I'm looking at that's worldwide, right? Let's if I go to all time domestic, the highest grossing domestic film is Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and that's 936.6 million. So no film has made more than 936.6 million domestically in the United States. Not even Avengers Endgame. That was 858 million, 858.3 million, that is, domestically. So a DCU film would have to make a significant amount of money internationally plus a significant amount of money domestically in order to get into that top five or into that top 10. And now looking at it this way, John, I don't see it. I mean, it's really going to depend on the international market. It's going to depend on China, really. China's got to come back to the table. If China comes back to the table for American films, then perhaps so. But if they're not going to, if they're going to sit it out, and if they're going to continue to focus on their own films, then no, certainly not. And why would they need to? They literally have the capacity. They have the populace. They have the market share to be able to make a movie that has grossed over $2 billion without an official, with making 20.8 million of that in the United States. They don't need us. They don't need our market to do it. Whereas our films, a DCU film, we desperately need our market and the international market to get into that category. Now, this doesn't mean that you need that to be profitable, right? All the people with all the bullshit excuses, oh, you need international to be profitable. No, you really don't. Not at all. But if we're talking about the scoreboard, if we're talking about top 10, then yeah, you would need that. And no, I don't see a DCU film doing that. I also don't see a Marvel film doing that. I feel like that was a unique exception, a unique situation with Endgame and Infinity War, and we're not going to see that again. Even if we get to the pre-pandemic box office numbers like the experts say that we'll get to after 2029, I still don't see it. I mean, we'll find out. I know Avatar: Way of the Water is a post 2020 film. I understand that. And if we're looking at the list of the top 10, Inside Out 2 is post pandemic. Spider-Man No Way Home is post pandemic. I understand that, but I don't, again, it's not very like important for me in that regard that it does that. I am going to go ahead and take the under and say no. I don't think that it's very likely that a DCU film will do that, but it also doesn't need to. And that's the most important thing, is to remember that it doesn't need to. Does not need to do that whatsoever. So either way, we'll see how it goes, right? I mean, if it ends up doing that, at some point, then hey, you know what? Hurrah for DC Studios, hurrah for James Gunn, Peter Safran. That'll be cool. However many years down the road that is with a Justice League type film, we'll see. But yeah, right now, I don't see it. Right now, I am not going to predict that that will be in the cards for DC Studios. All right, so let's go to the second one. He says this one's a two-parter. If this is too personal a question, you don't have to answer, or rather you can keep it vague if you like. I know you've been with the same woman now for 15 years. In your pre-Shonda days, do you remember how many girlfriends you had, and did you usually break up with them? Or were they with you, or is it 50-50? I usually have a hard time calling off relationships unless it was overwhelming or impractical for me. This is going to be a very short answer, John. I had one previous relationship. She broke it off with me. I will leave it at that and move on to the third question, where he says, I think long distance and the lady not being able to drive has been the challenge whenever I feel obligated to end a relationship. Like, I feel bad about it. I don't wish to break any woman's heart, but if I have to travel 2 hours every week and they can't drive or expect me to do all the heavy lifting, it just isn't feasible. I can handle it for a certain period of time, like a year, but 3 years of traveling 2 hours and they never come to visit me is just not a realistic long-term relationship, especially if there's zero incentive to live together. I do seem to have a pattern of living with regret. Whether it's lamenting my past decisions or the mistakes I made in the relationship, I've never been unfaithful to a lady. A lady was unfaithful to me at one point. Going back to my being too nice, a lot of the time I try to be. But I really needed to set boundaries with people when I was younger. I just didn't know how. The only thing I can do now, he says, as I'm 3 months away from being 36, is to learn what I did that was wrong over the last 15 years since I'd begun serious relationships. I'm sure there were things you wish you had done differently in the past with friends, family, and exes. I wish there were words I could have taken back, actions I should have taken. All I can do is just be better now. I don't know if you had been with anyone else besides Shonda that was longer than 3 years, but it does feel like time just ran through that hourglass when you spent time with two different people for a combined 8 years, 3 with Brittany, 5 with Laura, and then it vanishes like a melting candle, he says. I made a promise to Tammy. I will try my damnedest to succeed in making her happy. I will not fail her as I did my last relationships. I know she's also had difficulty with previous relationships too. She's 37 and got deprived of having boyfriends that actually courted her. And generally speaking, they just got physical and scheduled when to do it again, and that was it, he says. And just like me, she found herself having to have the traveling be one-sided, and she doesn't drive. When we meet, we always try to split the difference. Tammy, if you get a chance to listen to this show, you know that I love you, and I hope to build a sustainable future together. Well, that got very personal, John. Not that you haven't shared personal details before, but thank you for opening up on that one, because yeah, that's a deep dive. That's a deep dive, my good sir. But all right, so after all of that seriousness with respect to relationships, leave that there. The fourth and final question for this email, he asks, since your geek Mount Rushmore is Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, and DC, if you were on an island and only had one film from each franchise to access, what would you hope those films to be? He says, for me, it would be Star Wars, for him rather, it would be Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Episode 6, Star Trek 2009, the first Kelvin timeline film. For Marvel, it would be Avengers Endgame, and for DC, it would be Zack Snyder's Justice League. Let's see. For me, I think for Star Wars, it would probably be Empire. I know that ends on a cliffhanger, but yeah, I think that's my favorite of the Star Wars movies. So let's see. Do I want to would I want to repeat that? I mean, I probably watched it the most out of all of it, but it's not a very it's not a closed ended. It's not a closed loop whatsoever. So like I'm not going to do the cop out and be like, well, if I'm bringing that one, then I've got to finish it with Return of the Jedi. No, I'm not going to do that. Let's see. You know what? I tell you what. For the desert island pick, like, because there's a difference between like favorite and like, best, or in terms of like, this particular scenario where like a specific scenario where you're on an island and you can only watch one. If I were to pick one of the 11 Star Wars movies and I could only watch one of them, one that doesn't necessarily hang me off of a cliff, probably now that I think about it, A New Hope. New Hope. Yep, I pick A New Hope. Because the other ones, there's too much of a cliffhanger. They really, like all of them, like they don't finish things in that regard. Certainly not in any of the other trilogies. So yeah, New Hope, Episode 4. So that's my Star Wars pick. My Star Trek pick, is that going to be Kelvin timeline or is it going to be Prime timeline? I will go ahead and stick with Prime timeline, and I will say, let's see, an original crew movie or a TNG movie. Let's see. Tell you what, for a desert island pick, I will take Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. Yes, I'll take that one because that one has comedy, it has a good message. And even though they're not aboard the USS Enterprise for the majority of the film, it is the crew of the USS Enterprise. We do see the Enterprise at the very end of the film, so yeah, and it's a good self-contained. It's the final film of the Genesis trilogy, so it has a good like self-contained ending with respect to that at the end. It doesn't hang us off of a cliff. For Marvel, for the MCU, let's see. I know Endgame. I guess for desert island purposes, even though Endgame is not high on my list, for desert island purposes, would I take Endgame? Would I take Endgame or would I take Black Panther? Or would I take Shang-Chi? Because the thing is, I can take movies from Marvel without it necessarily being, like a cliffhanger and whatnot. You know what? Black Panther. Yes, the first Black Panther film. I will take that first Black Panther film and then quite honestly, for DC, I think I will agree with your pick, Zack Snyder's Justice League. I'll take that. So those are my four picks. Episode 4, A New Hope, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, Black Panther, and Zack Snyder's Justice League for my island picks, right? For my desert island picks if I were trapped on the desert island, that kind of thing. So those would be my picks from the nerd Mount Rushmore, if you will, of those four franchises: Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, and DC. All right, good questions there. So let's get to the second email from John, who says it's called The Keyword is On Here. And he's got a couple here, four more questions. So first of all, he says, with the announcement of Superman being on VOD, people on Threads were upset by it, just as people on Facebook were, on Reddit were, on X, Blue Sky, I'm guessing. But you know who wasn't upset by this? My friend Zach, who was caught up to date, but he saw the movie already because it's none of his business when Superman is released on digital. My elderly neighbor who lets me use her pool, who doesn't have time to go to the movies anymore, can watch it in high quality in the comfort of her home. Fans on here have this emotional investment to box office. I'm guilty of it too, but now I'm stepping outside the matrix and seeing that none of it matters. Okay, it matters a little, but these are first world problems. Hell, they're even more important first world problems than worrying about a studio missing a chance to let the film squeeze out more showings, he says. Superman is a success. Even if they waited 6 months to release on home release, would it have really made that much more? I doubt it. Everyone who wanted to see Superman in movie theaters saw it already. My mom was ready to go to the drive-in last week because she wanted to bring out dogs but she got sick, and now we have to wait for VOD. But internet's going to internet. I'm glad the film's a success, rather. I wish it could have made more, not because of box office dollars, but I wish more people saw it in theaters because the big screen is still a fun experience. So that's not much of a question. That's really more of a statement. But yeah, I do agree that the fascination with box office, the obsession with box office, is restricted to social media because all of the arguments for and against box office are on social media. You don't hear a whole lot of this at all in real life, right? People make their choices, and on top of that, like, there are plenty of people that a VOD release this early will most certainly benefit because they can't get to a movie theater for a variety of reasons, whether it is time, whether it is health, whatever, constraints that they have. Now they do have the ability to watch it at home, and it's not like that money, goes nowhere, right? It's $30 to own, $25 to rent, right? And that's a bit of a steeper rental price, to be honest with you. I've seen rentals, go for $19.99 or less, but they want $24.99 last I checked to just rent the movie for, like, I don't know, 48 hours or however long the period is. So yeah, you know, the box office thing, the scoreboard mentality, that's almost exclusively social media. It really is. Like, in real life, it's not that big of a deal. In fact, many people are probably like, "Oh, great! I don't have to wait 3 months. I can watch it at home now." That type of deal. But yeah, it's really, as far as social media is concerned, it's really just used to fit the bullshit fan narratives. Whatever they may be. Whether it is, it's a flop because it was released too soon, or it's another bad decision for Warner Brothers because they released it too soon, or because you're right. And I went through this the other day. We're like going through the box office, like that first month. It's like you see how the numbers are dwindling, and we're getting down to the point where weekly, on a daily tip, it's like 880,000, something like that. And if I look at here, if I go back to Box Office Mojo and I look at the Superman box office numbers, see where it's at right now. Right now, it's being reported at 594.5 million. So the belief is that it will cross 600 million this week. Now, on Wednesday, now this past week, here were your numbers, right? Monday the 11th did 991,000, right? On Monday the 11th. It did 1.39 million on Tuesday the 12th, and then dropped back down to 968,000 on Wednesday, 880,000 on Thursday, and then your Friday, Saturday, Sunday numbers: 1.4 million on Friday, 2.2 million on Saturday, 1.6 million estimated on Sunday at the time of me recording this, right? So that means that there was a bump in the first weekend. There was a bump in ticket sales the first weekend of its digital release, and that's what pushed it to 340.9 million domestic, 594.5 million globally, right? So there are still a number of weeks, because I talked about how they didn't pull Sinners or Minecraft out of theaters. Like, those theatrical runs didn't end until 90 days or more, when the film was only making a couple of grand a day at the cinema. And we're still a ways away from that, right? Because like a good portion of last week, he was still making, like, more than 750,000, right? Like, per day. And this weekend it had a bump of getting back up to 1.4 million, 2.2 million, 1.6 million. So Superman's going to be in theaters for a while, even with this VOD release, even with the digital release, right? And again, it's not HBO Max, it's not streaming. That's going to come later, right? So aside from the money that they're getting from VOD that people aren't paying attention to, the fact that they got to look at the numbers, and we're not going to make. I mean, there's going to be an uptick, but we're not getting back to the 12.9 million on Monday, 17.1 million on Tuesday. That was in the opening weekend, right? As far as the opening week of Superman's release, we're not getting back to those numbers, right? We've at this point, I think that Sunday, August 10th, 2.45 million, and mind you, I'm quoting domestic numbers, right? Domestic daily, right? I think that 2.4 million number on Sunday, August 10th, that's the highest we're going to see necessarily again for a Sunday. Saturday came close. Like, as of yesterday, Saturday the 16th came close. But yeah, I think that it's just going to keep going and going, but we've still got a ways to go before we get to those, like, couple thousands a day in that regard. So yeah, I feel like the box office conversation is exclusively online, and it's from a lot of people that really don't understand the business and are just looking for lazy shit to corroborate their bullshit, selfish ass fan arguments. That's all it really is, truthfully. All right, number two, on this second email from John R. Songs in the Key of Wisdom number 3. He asks, what song have you listened to more than any song in the history of your life? I'd say probably Oasis Wonderwall is mine. I think the Guinness record of a person listening to a song more than anyone in history would probably go to Brian Wilson. It's been well documented that he's listened to Be My Baby by the Ronettes more than 100,000 times. My answer off the top of my head is a hip hop song because when I think song, I think lyrics. It's a song called Electric Relaxation by A Tribe Called Quest, which comes off of their 1993 album Midnight Marauders, which I think is their best album. I know a lot of people like Low End Theory, and I know many others like People's Instinctive Travels in the Path of Rhythm, which is where Bonita Applebum and a number of others come from. I am a fan of old school hip hop, and A Tribe Called Quest is my favorite hip hop group of all time. And Electric Relaxation is my favorite hip hop song of all time. Now, John, if you decide to listen to this, I will warn you right off the bat, the lyrics are quite sexual. Like there's a lot of like sexual lyrics in it, but that's not what the video is about. At least that's not what they're doing in the video. In the video, which is shot in all black and white, they're from New York. The group is from New York, and they are literally like traveling by taxi, headed to a diner in the middle of like New York in what looks to be like dead of winter, no snow, but like everybody's bundled up with jackets, and you can see the cold breath like out there. Like it's a it's a New York video and it's like a New York song, and it's really just about like literally like relaxation and things that they do for relaxation, but there is a sexual component to the lyrics. Like if you listen to that song, unedited in that regard, and it's not a nasty song. It's not a song that like necessarily like it's under explicit lyrics. It's under like parental advisory, but there's way worse that you could hear in modern hip hop than anything the Tribe Called Quest did in that regard. Truthfully, back in the '90s, that was the best era, in my opinion, best era for hip hop. And the reason that I've listened to that song more than any other song is because many years ago, it was on the way to see Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. My auntie, my auntie Adrian was taking me and my sister Rachel and my cousin Rhonda to go see that movie, and this is back in the early to mid '90s, so this is still like cassette tape days, right? Not even CDR, like CD changers were about to come into the picture. They were starting to come into the picture, but more often than not, cars had tape decks and radios, and that was it. And for whatever reason, the tape that she had in the car that she was playing only had two songs on it. That was one of the songs. And the thing is, Tribe Called Quest samples a lot of jazz, and they sampled a tune, an old jazz tune from like 60s, 70s called Mystic Brew by Ronnie Foster, which I didn't know that at the time. But they sampled that for Electric Relaxation, and so that was what I really liked. I really liked the rhythm. I didn't hear lyrics. I wasn't paying attention to the lyrics as a kid, but I really, really dug the beat and I really, really dug the rhythm, right? And then later on, a couple years after that, the Wayans brothers actually used it as the music for their opening sequence, for their credit sequence, for their sitcom, Marlon and Sean Wayans, with John Witherspoon and a number of others. And so that was also kind of reinforced there because, again, now I'm hearing it on TV, like, oh, all right. And I just really dug it, really, really like it. It's probably my favorite. No, it's not probably. It is definitively my favorite hip hop song of all time and my favorite hip hop beat of all time. Again, sampled from jazz because the best hip hop, in my opinion, is sampled from jazz. No question about it. So that is my answer with respect to that question. Thank you for that one. So number three, this is a two-part question. So part one, he says, I have a favor to ask. Next time you speak to your uncle or if he's listening, I want to know something. With Howard Stern's time on Sirius coming to an end soon, I'm wondering if you got to listen to Stern's early days in Detroit. I found an old recording on Stern on December 9th, 1980, dedicating his entire show that day to John Lennon, who had been killed less than a day prior. I don't know if your uncle or your folks are Howard fans, but I'll tell the listeners a funny story after you answer this part. No, they're not Howard Stern fans, and I guarantee they never heard his early stuff, like in Detroit. I'm fairly confident in answering that question, because I don't know they necessarily have anything against him, but it's certainly not their tempo with respect to anything that he did like in his early days, and certainly not anything since then in that regard. And they never watched his show on E either in that regard. But part two of this, let's see, he says, my parents and me to some extent were once guests on the Stern Show. My dad submitted a tape into a contest of his, and they got like second or third place and won $1,000. I'm not going to share the content that's on the tape here, but if y'all know the material of those early days of his show, then you know. They were called in and they discussed the content that was shared, and I could be heard in the background. I believe I was a year old at the time. Oh, wow. Intriguing as far as the content. Yeah, I'm familiar, obviously, with Howard Stern show. I've also seen the movie, the pseudo documentary Private Parts that he did, which is again, it's a pseudo documentary of like his life and like his early days in his radio career. Paul Giamatti's in that movie. Was that the first Paul Giamatti movie I'd ever seen? Maybe, might have been. But either way, yeah, that would be that's interesting. I have an idea of where you're going with respect to like the type of content that it was. I don't remember. Obviously, I wouldn't know exactly what it was because I don't remember. I don't know like what that would have been. But either way, all right, fair enough. So okay, intriguing. Thank you for sharing that story as well, John. Now on to the fourth and final question from this particular email, which is a funny what if scenario. He says, I have this idea of random films being a part of the same universe, kind of like how Split revealed it takes place in the same universe as Unbreakable, he says. With the DCU having completely different genres made me think what other films doing this would look like, or would be like, rather. So I think I'll bring back the what if format this time for films that aren't connected but could be. I'll just have to make sure they're films you've seen. I'm only doing live action films, he says, because animated movies can't mirror each other as well as real people can. I'll omit sci-fi and horror and anything supernatural because these events would have been addressed in some form of the media. There, theoretically, I could say North by Northwest is in the same universe as Independence Day, since one takes place like 50 years prior, but since in the Independence Day universe, aliens have been confirmed to have existed since at least Roswell back in 1947, North by Northwest is in the 50s, I feel like that film would have had to mention alien sightings in some way. Plus, I've never seen North by Northwest, so that would be disqualified. He says, first up, the Godfather movies could take place in the same universe as the Blues Brothers. Why? Well, both films take place in different settings, and that's one of the interesting things about these scenarios I find fascinating, because Earth is such a big place, people could be anywhere at any time at all. Usually when films do something like this, it's the actors or places that confirm the shared universe, like Duke Brothers being homeless and coming to America, or Ray Stantz and Casper. I wouldn't count parodies like Spaceballs, where John Hurt explicitly references his death in Aliens. The worlds would have to be grounded enough to work in this setting. Limiting myself to just realistic films makes the challenge more exciting. Well, okay, real quick, by that definition, I would say Ray Stantz and Casper falls under parody. I would put him in the same category as John Hurt being an alien in that regard. Like I don't see Casper being in the same universe as Ghostbusters personally. Now, if you wanted to make some type of horrible story where the Ghostbusters are hunting down Casper, like vicious ghost hunters, I suppose that's one thing that you could do. But just with respect to that particular reference, I look at that more of a cameo than actually being connected. But you say Godfather movies and Blues Brother movies. Can they coexist? The only thing that could make me say no is Blues Brothers 2000 incorporated supernatural elements, so maybe not. If you took out that movie, it could work. What do you think? Forrest Gump in the same universe as the Godfather films would be interesting too. I want to know what your connective tissue is, because, like, both films taking place in different settings is one thing, but the problem that I think with the way that you've orchestrated this scenario, John, is, when you brought up the one strong example that you brought up was the Duke brothers being homeless and coming to America, right? So that connects coming to America and trading places, because I saw Coming to America first, and it's funny because we were just talking about this at work, but I saw Coming to America first as a kid, and then I saw Trading Places later, and I made that connection, right? So I understood, oh, that's why they were homeless, because of how Trading Places ends, right? And they even use the same music. It's the same director, John Landis. So to me, I need connective tissue. It feels like Godfather movies and the Blues Brothers is just kind of a random connection. And I don't know, like I'm rereading your email to see if there's something in there that allows you to connect the both of them. Because no, I don't see anything in there. I don't see any references that, like, any type of like there has to be something like you said, race, like either of your examples, like even parodies, like there's more of a connection between Spaceballs and the Alien films, right, than there is between the Godfather movies and the Blues Brothers movies. I don't know what your connector is. Like there has to be some connector in my opinion, and I'm trying to think of another example where this would work, like because that one Trading Places and Coming to America is a good example. Or this one just popped into my head. I've thought about this for years. The other Die Hard movies, right? I mean, we've got the main Die Hard films, right? Die Hard, Die Hard 2, Die Harder, Die Hard with a Vengeance, A Good Day to Die Hard, and Live Free or Die Hard. I did that out of order. Live Free or Die Hard was fourth. Good Day to Die Hard was fifth. All right, so you've got those five Die Hard movies, but then you have the other Die Hard movies, like The Last Boy Scout, which is Die Hard Private Eye, right? He's not John McClane, but he's Joe Hallenbeck, and he's doing a lot of the same stuff, and it's directed by Tony Scott, and it feels like it fits in the Die Hard universe, but he's not actually John McClane. Or Striking Distance, which is Die Hard on the Water, which is him and Sarah Jessica Parker, where he's, again, his name is Tom Hardy. No, not that Tom Hardy. No, a Pittsburgh police detective Tom Hardy, who after the death of his father, and then he believes he was killed by a serial killer. He got drummed out of the force, and I'm going to Pittsburgh River Police and started investigating a series of killings that are very similar to around the time when his father was killed by a serial killer in that regard, right? But he's doing Die Hard things again, not technically as John McClane, but as a John McClane type character. And then, of course, one of the most non-Die Hard movies one of my favorite most non-Die Hard movies that actually is a Die Hard movie, The Fifth Element, which is Die Hard in space, because Corbin Dallas is absolutely John McClane in space, right? So something like that type of continuum, and I've thought that for years with respect to those movies. Or here's another one. This is based off a director. How about the Paul Verhoeven continuum, right? The idea that RoboCop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers, all Paul Verhoeven films, take place in the same universe. Absolutely. Oh yes. I feel like that, even without, and there's some actors that are in each of those movies that like kind of cross over, but even without that, just the style and the setting of those movies, all that absolutely, like, there's a progression with respect to that. There really is. Like, you could start with RoboCop, you can progress to Total Recall, and then you can end in Starship Troopers and go through the Paul Verhoeven continuum with respect to those movies all happening together. So yeah, there's got to be some through line, some type of connector, not just random franchise to other random franchise. I get where you're going with that, but there has to be some type of connectivity, I feel, to have the conversation in that regard. So those are my two examples that I've added to the table, along with the Trading Places Coming to America example. It's not a bad what if scenario. I just think there's got to be a little bit more meat on the bones with respect to why we're connecting anything at all with these films, right? Whether it's a direct connection or whether it's an indirect connection in that regard. So that's my answer with respect to that. Now, this third email that you sent that was optional, it's all pictures, and I think some of these might be AI generated. So there is first an image. Okay, so this is all the DC heroes on the left facing off against all of the DC villains on the right. And are they all, oh, okay, these are multiple versions. Like, I'm seeing all the Lexes. I'm seeing Gene Hackman, Kevin Spacey, Michael Rosenbaum, not John Glover, but the other one who played, not the other, the Lex Luthor from Lois and Clark. Who was that? What was his name? He's been in a bunch of shit. John Shea, that's right. Yeah, no. First thing I saw this asshole in was he was the bad guy in Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, the sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Yes, they made a sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and yes, actually they made two sequels. Saw that one in theaters, but either way, yeah. So his Lex, and then let's say Eisenberg's Lex, of course, Nicholas Holt's Lex. So they're all facing off against each of their respective Superman actors on the other side. Okay, and then. Oh, okay. I see John Cryer. I see Michael Cudlitz. I also see animated one Clancy Brown. All right, this is a cool. And then you go further up, and there's other like villains and heroes like in the pantheon. They're not all live action, I don't think. It looks like some of them are animated. Maybe some of them are uh, comics only. Yeah, for sure. But no, this is. Oh, is it all okay? It's all the Superman. It's all the Kryptonians, all the Supermen and whatnot facing off against the Lexus and other. Okay, all right. It took me a minute to like process this picture. That is a cool picture. I do like it. It's almost like it's video game graphics, like it's Mortal Kombat, because it's like Superman versus the Lexus. Some of that. That is cool. And then this is an AI generated image of Batman. It looks like Batfleck. And Aquaman, specifically Jason Momoa's Aquaman. At least that's what the design and the hair looks like. And then specifically Arthur Fleck, Joker, and he's got it's oh, here we go. DC's $1 billion trio. Well, obviously that Batman is a little off because that would have to be Bale's Batman suit, not this looks way more like Batfleck. This is Ben Affleck's suit, like the ears and the shape of the bat. Yeah, this is definitely closer to Ben Affleck. But I get it. Batman made $1 billion with with TDK, and of course the Dark Knight Rises, and then Aquaman made $1 billion with his first film, and then of course Joker made $1 billion with his first film. So yeah, I get that. I do see that. Uh, then there's another AI generated image of, let's see, Beach Boys, Weird Al, and Oasis. These are bands that he's seeing in the upcoming weeks. All right, fair enough. And then he sent another image of him as Ron Nasty and Tammy, his girlfriend, as June Fang. Well, thank you for sending those images. I'm not a big proponent of AI, but every once in a while it's like, all right, that's interesting. That's a thing. It's not something that I do, but it is a thing. It's understandable. Cool. Thank you for sharing those, John, and thank you for your email feedback this week. Of course, it is always greatly appreciated. All right, next up we've got Amr checking in with some thoughts and of course the watch update. He has progressed quite a bit with respect to his DS9 watch, but the summary says that he shared his thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Spider-Man news, the Hunger Games book and movie, and DS9 Season 1 episodes. It goes on to say that he found Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 to be the strongest in the trilogy and praised its emotional depth and humor. He also discussed the new Spider-Man suit, his preference for the Raimi suit, and the homemade aspect of the suit. He enjoyed the Hunger Games book, narrated by Tatiana Maslany, and compared it to the movie adaptation, noting differences in character portrayals and plot details. And then he reviewed DS9 episodes 14 through 19, highlighting character development in the storyteller, moral dilemmas in progress, whimsical sci-fi in If Wishes Were Horses, character moments in The Forsaken, and strong performances in Dramatis Personae and Duet. And I will already warn you that he's already finished Deep Space Nine Season 1, because he sent a second email detailing his thoughts on the final episode of that season, because that first season of DS9 was only 20 episodes. So let's get into the bulk of Amr's thoughts with respect to Star Trek and whatnot this evening. He says, "Hey Ray, hope you're doing well and feeling great. Same goes to everyone tuning in. I missed last week's flight chat because I was buried in papers for military conscription. Don't worry, I probably won't be going. Let's just say the Army and I aren't a match made in heaven. I still have a medical inspection coming up, but I have a condition that's definitely not Army material. Well, stay safe out there, and best of luck to you either way. Definitely, Amr. Just steer clear of, all of the hostilities if possible. Here's hoping." But he says, "So what else have I been up to? I almost wrapped up the first season of DS9. About time, right? I have just an episode left that I did not have time to watch in time for the email, but I'll send an update as soon as I can. If you're not, you'll hear my thoughts about it next week." No, we'll get to his thoughts. He sent that email. He says, "I'm still cruising through my Peacemaker rewatch, and I also revisited an MCU movie I hadn't seen since it hit theaters, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Since I missed last week's flight chat, I'm making it up with this email. I know my emails are long, believe me. I don't intentionally make them that way," he says, "but the recent flight chat episodes were extremely long, probably due to a packed July. I hope this email doesn't lead to another 4 or 5 hour long episode for your sake. It won't. In fact, we're not doing that again. I mentioned last week, Amr, that if we do get to a point where the emails are going to stretch that long, we're just going to have to break it up into multiple episodes. It's just going to have to happen, because we can't have that many long episodes for everybody to listen to, and my production of these episodes aside, truthfully. But he says reading for that long can definitely be exhausting, not to mention you still have to edit and publish afterward. I completely understand if you don't make it through the whole thing this time. This week should be shorter, famous last words, but we'll continue on. He says there will be spoilers for everything I talk about. I think Guardians Volume 3 is fair game, but the Hunger Games section is where I'd especially warn listeners, since I'll be discussing both the book and the movie. That's going to be tricky for me as well, Amr, because even though I have seen the first film and Catching Fire, I haven't seen Mockingjay. And neither of the Mockingjay films. And I also haven't read the books. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know. I'm not sure how much of it I'm going to read. But he says, let's get started. He says, I recently rewatched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 for the first time since it was released back in 2023. That year was incredibly packed with major films. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, Barbie, Oppenheimer, 4 DC films, 3 other MCU entries, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Yet, even in such a busy year, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 didn't get lost in the shuffle. It stood out then, And after revisiting it, it still stands out now. In fact, I think it's the strongest entry in the trilogy. And that armor is probably why it made money and was one of just two comic book films that and into the or across the Spider-Verse rather that made money because everything else with respect to DC and Marvel did not succeed that particular year. And you add those other movies into it, Mission Impossible, Barbie, Oppenheimer. I think didn't Indiana Jones, right? Didn't Dial of Destiny also come out that year? There was too much. 2023 was way, way too flooded in the marketplace, and it hurt the comic book movies immensely. This is why the DCEU films failed as far as box office. This is why the Marvels and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania failed. However people feel about those movies, it was just way too packed of a year. But as far as Guardians Volume 3 is concerned, he says, this film had been greatly anticipated ever since it was announced, especially after the success of Volume 2, but things got messy when James Gunn was fired by Disney over old outdated tweets, throwing the project into limbo. In the years between his firing and reinstatement, Gunn was scooped up by DC, where he made The Suicide Squad, one of his best works outside of Superman, and the Peacemaker TV series, which was about to get its second season. Thanks to overwhelming fan support, as well as the backing of the cast and crew, Gunn was eventually rehired to write and direct Volume 3. That made the eventual 2023 release feel even more special. A triumphant return for both Gunn and the Guardians. From the moment the film starts, he says, it feels more like a James Gunn movie than a typical MCU installment. It's as if Kevin Feige just handed Gunn the keys and let him go wild. You can also clearly see how much Gunn has grown as a director and writer since Volume 1. He'd already proven himself with the first two films, but The Suicide Squad really showcased his creative confidence, and Volume 3 benefits from that maturity, he says. Like Gunn's other works, this movie is filled with heart. You can feel it in the way the Guardians treat and banter with each other. And nowhere is it more powerful than in Rocket's backstory. That storyline isn't just emotional, it's the movie's beating heart, giving Rocket incredible depth while also fleshing out the terrifying and unrelenting nature of the High Evolutionary. Chukwudi Iwuji is fantastic in the role. While I'd only seen him before in Peacemaker, I think this is his best performance yet. The High Evolutionary might be my favorite villain Gunn has written, rivaled only by his interpretation of Lex Luthor in Superman. Of course, the film isn't without its fun moments, Armour says. As you'd expect from Gunn, the humor is sprinkled throughout, balancing the heavy drama with lighter, more unserious beats. Some people don't click with Gunn's sense of humor, but I personally love it, he says. The character interactions, the snappy conversations, the little digs, the absurd misunderstandings are just fun to watch, especially since we've spent years with these characters across two movies and various MCU appearances. Their chemistry is one of the franchise's greatest strengths. The soundtrack, he says, as always, is delightful. Gunn has a gift for pairing scenes with the perfect needle drops, and multiple songs from this film's soundtrack have found a home in my own playlist. Creep by Radiohead, We Care a Lot by Faith No More, Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine, and more. As for the score, I was a little disappointed that the classic Guardians theme wasn't used much, appearing only once, but I understand the choice. With Rocket in peril and the team fractured for most of the story, that musical identity wouldn't have hit the same way. Composer John Murphy makes up for it with a phenomenal new theme for the High Evolutionary. The operatic music he gives the villain is powerful, dramatic, and imposing, a theme worthy of the character's name. It perfectly conveys his arrogance, self-importance, and godlike delusions. In the end, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is a fitting, heartfelt, and exciting conclusion to this chapter of the team's story. It delivers emotional payoffs for the characters, thrilling action, memorable humor, and one of the MCU's most compelling villains. It's the rare trilogy ender that feels complete, satisfying, and true to its creator's vision. James Gunn didn't just make another Marvel movie here, he made something deeply personal, and it shows. I know this is late for a review of a film that came out 2 years ago. Sheesh, has it really been that long? But I decided to give it a try, since I caught the first two films on TV just a week ago. Revisiting Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 reminded me why this trilogy and Gunn's work still stands out so strongly even 2 years later. It's a film that is heartfelt, fun, and unforgettable. Amr, I would say that generally speaking, that those are the general thoughts with respect to that trilogy and that film. I would say with respect to Gunn's growth as a filmmaker, I agree with you, because even in the sense of when you talk about him, Feige just giving him the keys and letting him go, he did that in Guardians Volume 2, and it's not as strong, in my opinion. I feel like there's a lot of things in Guardians Volume 3 that make it a sci-fi comedy as opposed to a comedy sci-fi. And I feel like he got back to making a comedy sci-fi in this particular film, where it's a sci-fi movie with comedic elements. That's what this film is. That's what the first film is. The second film is a comedy with science fiction elements, and I think it's better served for this film. Do I have this one right higher than the first one? I feel like I do, but let me double check that. Yes, I do. So I agree with you that it's the strongest of the trilogy because I have it ninth in my MCU rankings list. And yes, this list is updated with Fantastic Four First Steps, which I mentioned earlier a couple weeks ago. I have sixth on my MCU list. So we're talking top tier MCU. Volume 3 is in. I have the first one, Volume 1, at number 19. It's like right kind of almost dead center in the middle of the mid tier. I still do enjoy that film, but just ranking it like, prospectively against others in the franchise, that's where I put it. And so I think that what you're talking about with Gunn's evolution as a director, yes, most certainly. I think that he's found a way now to like strike even better of a balance between the humor and the more heartfelt portions and the development, the character development and the story development with respect to his films. And I think, quite honestly, going over to DC and doing the Suicide Squad most certainly helped him develop that because he was able to really hone his balance there, without having to deal with Kevin Feige being in the edit room consistently. And I think that's also why this film is different. I don't know that Feige was in the edit room nearly as much with him as he's been with other Marvel directors in the past, or even how he was with Gunn in the first film in that regard, right? But either way, I think that this definitely it was his magnum opus in my opinion as far as comic book films, or rather, I would say the Suicide Squad was his magnum opus. I felt that I still feel that his two strongest films, comic book movie wise, are DC films, but this definitely I would say Guardians Volume 3 strongest of that trilogy. Yes, I would absolutely agree with that for sure. And now we'll see the majority, like the rest of his work as far as DC is concerned. So looking forward to that, of course. Amber says, staying in the Marvel Universe, it's been hard not to notice all the buzz around Spider-Man lately. The new suit, behind the scenes promos, and everything in between. Okay. Now, I'm not a hardcore Marvel fan, he says. I'm a fan, but not like I am of DC. My only exception for hardcore fandom is absolutely one of my favorite superheroes of all time, Spider-Man. Of all the Marvel comics I've read, Spider-Man is the one I've read the most. I've read Superior Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, and even some of the Miles Morales run, he says, before he was moved into the main 616 universe. I've read some of the Amazing Spider-Man comics, too. Heck, I even found a reprint book collection of Amazing Fantasy number 15, Spider-Man's first appearance, along with the first few issues of The Amazing Spider-Man by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. I remember the story where he meets the Fantastic Four for the first time and fights them. They're not originals, of course, but they were part of an official Marvel comic collection. Still, I think this shows how much of a Spider-Man fan I am. I'm like Wally Mustafa if he were a hardcore Spider-Man fan instead of a Superman fan. Hope this doesn't rub him the wrong way. I doubt it will. He says those recent Spider-Man news are something, huh? First of all, I absolutely like that Sony and Marvel Studios have taken the initiative themselves to reveal the suit and other behind-the-scenes stuff rather than just begin filming and fall prey to scoopers and people filming the set in public in Glasgow, I believe. Let's get to the star of the news so far, the new suit, he says. Oh boy, that new suit is wonderful. We've seen it before in the ending of No Way Home, but that was just a CGI model and they never actually made the suit. Now seeing it in real life, it looks awesome. I believe most Spider-Man fans would agree we haven't had a bad Spider-Man suit. I would say that, but I'm sure somebody doesn't like one of the cinematic suits. And to that end, Amr says, yes, even the first Amazing Spider-Man suit. I know that suit gets a lot of hate, but I still like it. Yeah, it doesn't get hate from me. I like it better than the second one, truthfully. And I know people love the second one from Amazing Spider-Man 2 because of the bigger eyes. And I think it has the, I think they are the emotive eyes. I don't remember exactly. It's been a minute since I've seen that movie. But yeah, either way, he says the sequel suit definitely hits it out of the park. Personally, I'm more of a Raimi suit guy. I sport that suit whenever I play through the PS4 Spider-Man game, so that says something. I still haven't played the sequel. It has the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit in it, but I don't have a PS5, so I can't play it. Anyway, getting off track, the point is I like the suit. In comparison to other MCU Spider-Man suits, this one is the best. I'll agree with that. As far as MCU Spider-Man suits, I think I still would put the ASM-1 suit from Garfield as my favorite. I don't really care about the hate for it, argue with the wall on that one, but it's all subjective in that regard. Amr says, I've liked the MCU Spider-Man suits overall, My favorite of the trilogy is the red and black one. The Iron Spider suit I like too, but I think it suffers from not being an actual suit. It's mostly a CGI model. Also, in my opinion, it suffers from classic MCU costume over design. Yeah, I would agree with that, even though I do still enjoy it. But the new one revealed recently for the upcoming trilogy is awesome. Raised webbing like the old live action suits? Yes, please. Finally, all the Spider Man suits pre Tom Holland had raised webbing, with the exception of the first Amazing Spider Man 2012 suit, which makes the new one special in that it is homemade, he says. Sure, in real life it's made by a multi-million-dollar studio, but in the context of the film and from what we've seen in No Way Home's ending, it's made by Peter himself. No Stark Tech, no gadgets, no nothing. Just Peter's majestic sewing skills. My excitement for the new movie is definitely through the roof after that stuff was revealed, but let's be honest, it was through the roof anyway. Come on, it's Spider-Man. Yes, with you on that one. I had my thoughts with respect to that suit, and yeah, I hear you. So, are you asking to be designated as our resident Spider-Man superfan on this show? Anybody else wish to challenge Amr for that title? I don't know. We'll see how that goes. We'll see if anybody else responds to that particular challenge. But so far, I'm okay with it. But we'll see how it goes. But here, let's get to the trickiest part of your email for me to read personally. Because he says, keeping with the theme of revisiting old favorites, I returned to Panem, but with a new perspective. I read the Hunger Games book for the first time before rewatching the movie. The Hunger Games is a franchise I'm familiar with. I've watched all the movies multiple times, and it's safe to say I enjoy watching and revisiting them. But one thing I had never done before was read the books. As of now, I've read the first book in the series. By read, I mean I listen to an audiobook while reading along with a digital copy on my tablet. Well, that extra step, I think, is still more than what people do when they read the audiobook. They just listen to the audiobook. I don't know that anybody follows along with the actual book, or maybe they do, and it's just not something that I do because I've never really dove into that yet. He says the audiobook is narrated by Tatiana Maslany, of all people. Most know her from the TV show Orphan Black, and of course, She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Yes, indeed. I've really enjoyed the book, he says, and that enjoyment was definitely enhanced by the audiobook. Tatiana Maslany doesn't just read the book, she performs it. It feels like she's voice acting the story. The book is entirely from the perspective of our main character, Katniss Everdeen, and honestly, sometimes it feels like Tatiana Maslany is Katniss Everdeen even more than Jennifer Lawrence. In terms of how adaptations go, I think the movie does a solid job adapting the first book in the series. Of course, like with any adaptation, there are multiple changes and plenty of material cut from the book, he says. For one, the movie trims the plot significantly, and it also adds scenes that aren't in the book. The novel is told entirely in first person from Katniss's point of view, while the movie includes scenes that don't feature her at all, such as those with game maker Seneca Crane and the series' main antagonist, President Coriolanus Snow. The book also has Katniss explaining a lot about the world and its systems, whereas in the movie, that information is conveyed through the added scenes I mentioned, including the Hunger Games commentators like Caesar Flickerman. In the books, Claudius Templesmith is the main arena announcer, while Caesar is purely the TV host. In the films, Claudius is essentially cut, and many of his duties are shifted to Caesar. Timeout. I did these names. Like, I have to, like, this is one of those cases where I have to remind myself that as a writer, somebody that really wishes to, like, write his own original fiction, I have to, this is one of those moments where I have to remember to, like, screw up my courage and just do it, right? Because every once in a while, you'll have, like, a life moment and realize, you know what? That's out there. This is there. Well, why are you so afraid? And I'm not saying anything bad about the Hunger Games novels whatsoever, because I haven't read them. And obviously, they've been vastly successful, and there's a giant swell of a fan base, like, for them. But when I hear names like Claudius Templesmith and Caesar Flickerman, and I just think back to moments where I have, like, literally stressed, like, for hours and in some cases days to think of a character name myself, and I'm trying to think of one that doesn't sound like corny or hackneyed or cheesy, and then I hear the names Claudius Templesmith and Caesar Flickerman in a successful novel series. That's when I have to remind myself, dude, just do it. Just seriously write your damn book. Just seriously do it and get it out there, because holy shit, the people that are not as afraid as you are put that out there, and it's succeeding to the point where I am now reading a feedback email from a listener who read the books and watched the movies in which these names are actually, like, out there in the wild, right? Like, published successfully in that regard. So yeah, just had one of those moments just hearing those names. It's like, okay, you know what? Get over yourself. Come on. Like myself, I'm talking to myself here. Like I'm looking in the mirror, like, dude, just get over your fears, get it going. Anyway, little brief aside. Getting back to Amro's review, he says when it comes to material cut out, most of it comes from the third act. The third act is much longer in the book than in the movie. Cutting out scenes for a film is understandable. You have to keep the runtime in that golden 2 hour and some minutes range to allow for more theater showings. You simply can't fit everything from the book. For example, like in the movie, there's a point when the game maker announces that two tributes from the same district can win the Hunger Games. Katniss sets out to find Peeta Mellark and discovers him seriously injured. The same thing happens in the book, but the difference is in the recovery process. In the film, Peeta's healing is shown quickly, while in the book, it's a much slower process that takes several days. There's far more tension because we're inside Katniss's head, feeling the constant uncertainty over whether Peeta will survive. This extended recovery is also where much of the relationship development between Katniss and Peeta happens. In the movie, that development is condensed, leaning heavily on moments like Peeta throwing Katniss the loaf of bread in their childhood. Yeah, and that's a pacing difference. This is why, like, the comparison of books to movies can be very precarious when trying to do that, because obviously you can get away with a lot longer pacing in a book that you cannot get away with in a film for the reasons that you specified for runtime. He says another major difference is the removal of an entire character from the books, Madge, the mayor's daughter, who is a friend of Katniss and goes to school with her. In the book, Madge is the one who gives Katniss the Mockingjay pin. In the movie, Katniss buys it at the Hob, District 12's black market, from Greasy Say's granddaughter, who is never named on screen. And then there's Rue, he says. Rue's district, in the book, District 11, shows its gratitude to Katniss by sending her a loaf of bread to their specific to their district, rather. The book makes a point of noting that while gifts between districts and tributes are allowed, they are extremely expensive and therefore unusual. In the movie, this scene is replaced with something entirely different. After Rue's death, we see the people of District 11 rising up against the Peacekeepers and, by extension, the Capitol. This is something the book can't show, since we're limited to Katniss's perspective, but the movie uses the opportunity to show the world outside the games and hint at the seeds of rebellion. Beyond structure and pacing, he says, a few character portrayals shift in interesting ways. Effie Trinket on the page is stiffer and more oblivious to District 12's reality, whereas Elizabeth Banks layers in an eccentric charm that makes Effie both funny and oddly endearing. Haymitch in the book is harsher and more openly drunk at first, which makes Katniss and Peeta's trust slower to build. The film softens him earlier, so the mentor-mentee bond lands faster. Cinna's bond with Katniss feels instant and essential in both, but the book lingers on his quiet rebellion. The Girl on Fire design reads like a pointed political act that Katniss senses even if she can't fully name it yet. The movie also broadens the lens with moments the book can't provide, he says, like cutting to Capitol viewers and TV spectacle. Those shots underline how the games operate as entertainment and propaganda in real time, complementing the commentators and the Snow Seneca cutaways. On the page, all of that is inferred through Katniss's observations and the rules she relays. On screen, it's made literal by reaction shots and production room decisions. Violence and intensity play differently across mediums, he says. The novel isn't gratuitous, but it's more sensory and specific about injuries, exhaustion, and fear because we're trapped in Katniss's body and thoughts. The film, working within a PG-13 frame, leans on implication, quick cuts, and stylized framing. It's effective, but it naturally softens some of the rawness you feel on the page. The Katniss-Peeta dynamic is where perspective matters most. In the book, we sit with Katniss's uncertainty about her own feelings. How much is survival strategy, how much is genuine, and how much is even knowable in the arena. The movie nods to that ambiguity, but it reads a touch more like a straightforward romance simply because we don't have access to her inner monologue. That ambiguity in the book stretches into the ending, which lands with a sharper sense of unease. The endings, he says, resonate differently in tone. The book closes with Katniss understanding the Capitol's anger and the cost of outplaying the narrative, even as she and Peeta survive. The film communicates that visually, Snow watching, calculating, but the novel's first-person voice lets you feel the dread and confusion settling in before the next chapter of their lives begins. Overall, he says, I think the movie is a strong adaptation of the book and is a richer experience, not because one invalidates the other, but because each medium emphasizes different strengths. The book gives you interiority, slow burn tension, and small character beats that hit hard. The movie widens the canvas to show the spectacle machine at work and sets the stage for rebellion in a more overt way. Experiencing them back to back, especially with Tatiana Maslany's performance, putting me squarely in Katniss's head, made the whole story feel deeper. The book made certain more made certain moments more intimate. My goodness. The film made the world feel bigger. Together, they sharpen what this series is really about: survival, performance, power, and who gets to control the story. All right, so your whole Hunger Games rewatch was really just about the first book, which is fine because I haven't read the first book, but I have watched the first movie, so no spoilers for me. When you do Catching Fire, there will be no spoilers for me there. Mockingjay will be tough. That will be difficult. So we'll see. And I own them. There's actually two different steelbook sets, 4K steelbook sets that have been released for the Hunger Games saga. The first one, the one that I have, is one from Walmart, which comes in a regular steelbook case, and the discs are in stacked position, which I know a number of collectors don't really care for that whatsoever because they don't really like the protection like for the discs themselves in the case, and has a slip cover over it. Really nice slip cover. So there's that version, and then there's also a version available on Amazon that I believe might be an Amazon exclusive, where they come in individual steelbooks in a box. They're both 8 disc sets, and I think special features wise, there's nothing different. It's just a question of whether or not you want the regular slim, the regular slimmer Blu-ray or steelbook case, I should say, or whether you want 4 individualized steelbook cases in a box. I mean, you're fine either way, and I have sets that do one or the other. And if I were to like double dip, which quite honestly, that's a discussion I've been having with respect to having multiple versions of particular films, I've already decided that there are a few that I thought I was upgrading but decided to keep them. This would be one that I would think about, truthfully, because I actually really like the art or the artwork for the individual steelbook cases and the box for that version, the ones with the individuals. So that's one to think about. But my ultimate point here, Amr, is that I own the movies. I just haven't watched the last two. Perhaps I may. I don't know. You know what? I'm not even gonna make that promise. It's just if I get to it, I get to it. If not, we'll just have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But let's get to the bulk of your email for this particular week, because as you say here, with my Hunger Games rewatch done, it was back to the station. I'm almost done with season 1 of DS9, covering episodes 14 through 19. Before diving in, you might have noticed, he says, that last time I've somehow mentioned stuff about the future of a character before I even got to it. Well, that's because it's unfortunately been spoiled for me. Ever since starting Star Trek, my feed on YouTube has been flooded with Star Trek stuff. One vid I watched spoiled something for me which relates to Nog, but this is ultimately my fault. Since this is an old show, I shouldn't expect a spoiler warning, and I should have been more cautious on my end. But hey, what has happened happened. I'll be much more careful next time. Okay, well, I'm really hoping that with respect to... I'm hoping that Nog was the worst of it, because there's one or two characters that I really, really hope you don't get spoiled on what happens to their character arcs, and you very well could. One of them, now that I think about it, with YouTube stuff, I'll give you extra warning. It's gonna be nearly impossible, because one of the characters in this main cast is so critical to the future of this show with respect to all the seasons that you're gonna watch that it will be very difficult for you to avoid those spoilers if YouTube and the YouTube algorithm is throwing stuff in your direction. So just be really careful, because it's dangerously possible that you're going to get spoiled on some level before you reach that point. And I can't say who it is, obviously, and I can't tell you when it's going to happen. As far as like if you watch this without spoilers, you're going to reach a point where a major light bulb, a major turning point is going to happen with the character. It's going to be like, oh, wow, okay, you're not there yet. You've got a ways to go. I can't tell you when, and I can't tell you who. But and I feel like even saying this like is saying more. And don't get me wrong, there's more twists. There's way more twists. There's a shitload of twists, truthfully, in this particular series. But either way, yeah, let's just dive into your episode review. So you've got 5 here in this first one. You start with episode 14, The Storyteller, which he says was an alright episode. It has many good things to offer, such as the O'Brien and Dr. Bashir subplot, where O'Brien is thrust into a religious and spiritual prophet leadership type role as the Sarah. There's also the Bajoran land dispute between two tribes, with one of them yet led by a very young girl, Vera Sewell. That subplot might be my favorite of the two, especially because it features Jake and Nog, who are the same age as Varys. Their scenes together allow her to actually be a child for once, rather than just a promising leader under constant pressure. This episode has kind of a split focus that offers two very different types of stories. The O'Brien Bashir storyline leans into the classic Star Trek trope of being caught up in unfamiliar cultural rituals. O'Brien being chosen as the next Sarah is both awkward and humorous. It gives more insight into his character, particularly his discomfort with Bashir, and shows how their dynamic slowly shifts from irritation to reluctant camaraderie. The Bajoran subplot, however, he says, carries more emotional weight. Verisul is under intense pressure to lead, and the story does a good job of showing what that burden looks like. Her quieter moments with Jake and Nog give her space to act like a teenager, not just a political figure. That contrast between duty and adolescence adds nuance to her character and helps highlight how much weight even the youngest leaders are forced to carry in Bajoran society post-occupation. This episode offers a mix of humor, cultural intrigue, and youthful perspective through its two parallel storylines. On one side, O'Brien is reluctantly placed in the role of Sarah, a spiritual figure meant to protect a village from a mythical energy storm. The absurdity of the situation highlights the cultural misunderstandings that Starfleet officers often face, while also deepening O'Brien's growing dynamic with Bashir. Their awkwardness brings some levity and character growth, even if the stakes feel slightly exaggerated. I do wonder if this is the Geordi and Data friendship you were alluding to last time. Maybe? You'll have to wait and see. He says the subplot with Varys Sewell feels more grounded and emotionally resonant. Her struggle between responsibility and childhood delivers the episode's most poignant moments. Jake and Nog continue to grow as characters, and their ability to connect with Varys adds depth to all three. While The Storyteller may not be among DS9's strongest episodes, its strength lies in character development and cultural exploration. It reinforces DS9's focus on interpersonal stories, not just grand sci-fi plots, and offers a glimpse into Bajor's ongoing social recovery. Also, the word Sarah used in this episode sounds remarkably close to the Arabic word Sarah, which means biography or life story. In Islamic tradition, ignore it if you like, even if I transliterate in English, it still would be difficult to pronounce. Yeah, I can't pronounce what you've written here with these characters, I'm sorry. But he says it refers to the Prophet Muhammad's biography, a revered narrative that carries moral and spiritual lessons. That parallel gives the episode's concept of the Sarah more depth. Someone who preserves unity and culture through storytelling, ensuring the survival and identity of their people. Whether or not it was intentional, the resonance is striking. Now, I'm not saying there's a similarity between the Prophet Muhammad as a person and the role of the Sarah in their episode. I'm just making note of the word similarity and linguistic connection. Well, Amr, at this point, you know full well that Star Trek is nothing if not a haven for allegories. So I'm going to go ahead and say that was intentional, and probably a deeper dive into the notes for the episode will reveal that. They absolutely were using it as an allegorical means, no doubt. I have no doubt of that. He says this linguistic connection, combined with the episode's emphasis on legacy, leadership, and the burden of narrative tradition, subtly deepens the story's themes. It's another example of how DS9 occasionally weaves in layered meaning, even in its more average episodes, through the interplay of myth, culture, and identity. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you're still in season one, and yet you were finding more enjoyment than maybe many others did in those first few seasons compared to what this show does from season 3 on. But again, we'll get there. On to the next episode, number 16, Progress, or 15 rather, episode 15. He says this episode is essentially DS9's version of a classic Star Trek moral dilemma, pitting individual rights against the needs of the many. Major Kira is forced to confront her role not as a freedom fighter but as a government enforcer, removing an old man, Mullabak, from his home to make way for a Bajoran energy project. The irony is powerful. She spent years resisting Cardassian orders, and now she's the one giving them. For some reason, I did not enjoy this episode much, but I think it's due to its surprisingly slow pace. Mullabak is the classic stubborn old man of the land archetype. His scenes are well acted, but the pacing during those moments can feel slow. Still, the real weight of the episode lies in Kira's inner conflict, which gives Nana Visitor the space to show some quiet emotional depth. Not flashy, but layered. The Jake and Nog subplot, which revolves around them trying to trade and turn a profit, brings in a light and fun counterbalance. It's a small part of the episode, but it helps with pacing and tone. Nog doesn't dominate the subplot, but he's still an active presence, more of a support than a focal point. That said, I think I'm starting to look forward to whatever these two are up to. Nog is clearly trying to live up to Ferengi ideals through business and trade, while Jake shows this open-minded curiosity and supportiveness. Their scenes aren't just fluff, they're a quiet little window into how both are growing up in different cultures but learning from each other. Jake's willingness to spend time with Nog, despite the usual prejudice against Ferengi, says a lot about who he is. and Nog trying to succeed in business like his father and uncle give him an added layer of ambition. Their subplot isn't central to the episode, but it adds charm and helps fill in the quiet spaces. Maybe I didn't connect with this episode as much as others because it reminded me of certain real-world events happening now, he says, especially the subtler aspect of Mullibach's situation. Progress can hit differently depending on what's going on around you or in the world. Mullibach's refusal to leave his home in the name of national progress touches on very real and sensitive issues, things like displacement, occupation, and the question of whose rights matter most. DS9 often uses allegory to explore colonialism, sovereignty, and moral ambiguity, but when those allegories mirror painful real-life events too closely, the episode can feel emotionally charged in a way that goes beyond thoughtful storytelling. And I think that's okay. It makes sense that that's how you relate to an episode like this. Depends on your context. I would agree with that, Amr. I would also say that I have experienced that myself with respect to not just DS9 episodes, but Star Trek in general. But there's an episode or two of DS9 going forward that most certainly I feel what you're talking about because they hit home in a few ways with respect to cultural and ethnic difficulties. And that is as much as I will say about that. Obviously, these are things that may center around the central character of the show, if you will, the leader, the lead actor. I'll say that. He deals with some stuff later on in the show that allegorically impacts me very similarly to the impact that you're talking about, truthfully. And I won't rank which one is stronger. I would just say that it was very strong for me, still is to this day. And I can see that. There's going to be, this show's going to touch on that. So there's going to be times where you definitely will run into that going forward. Just a heads up on that. I'm sure you know that already, but just this is what Star Trek does. It absolutely frames real world events and real world implications in a galactic sense in a fictional sense so that it opens our eyes a little bit with respect to what's actually going on in the world. No doubt. All right, episode 16, If Wishes Were Horses. He says, this is a welcome change of pace, a whimsical high-concept sci-fi romp that stands apart from the more serious, morally complex episodes that came before it. The story kicks off when people's imaginations start manifesting physically on the station. Rumpelstiltskin, Buck Bokai, and a fantasy version of Jadzia Dax created from Bashir's desires all suddenly appear. It has the flavor of a TNG Holodeck Gone Wrong episode, but with a DS9 twist. The light tone is balanced by a gradually unfolding mystery. These aren't just random hallucinations, but part of a first contact experiment by a powerful unknown species from the Gamma Quadrant. I thought this episode was good, he says. It had much better pacing than the previous one, and the humor landed well, especially Quark's interactions with his fantasies and Bashir's flustered reactions to fantasy Jadzia. The whole imagination coming to life idea is fun, and by the time we realize there's more at play, the sci-fi intrigue kicks in just enough to keep things from feeling throwaway. The final reveal that the manifestations were created by aliens trying to understand human thought is very Star Trek. I kind of expected it. I guess watching enough Star Trek can make you expect what's coming in these shows. TNG definitely had similar concepts where the aliens are the ones doing the exploring instead of the Federation. When Sisko asks who they are, the being posing as Buck Bokai just replies, perhaps next year we'll tell you. I thought, okay, fine, keep your secrets. See you in season 2, I guess. Nope, don't get your hopes up. They don't come back. I'll go ahead and dash that for you right now so that you're not looking forward to it, or they don't come back. This is the only time you see them. So, no, you will not see them in season 2, unfortunately. But he says, while not essential to the larger plot, the episode gives us a breather from heavier themes and shows DS9's cast having fun with a more comedic, surreal scenario. It doesn't move any major arcs forward or dive deep into character development, but it does reinforce the station's position as a place where the unexpected can happen, and where new strange encounters with Gamma Quadrant species might pop up at any time. For now. But continuing to episode 17. The Forsaken. Oh my, it's Lwaxana Troi, he says. What a surprise. Ever since I entered the Star Trek fandom, I've noticed that Lwaxana isn't exactly a fan favorite. No, she's not. Her episodes are often looked back on with a bit of an eye roll. Yes, they are. But I digress, he says. I seem to be in the minority that enjoys a Lwaxana Troi appearance. Her episodes in TNG were often fun for me, usually offering a change of pace after some heavier storylines. Here in DS9, though, that pattern doesn't quite apply. This episode follows another lighthearted one, but even so, The Forsaken manages to offer something with a little emotional weight. Yes, it does. The real heart of this episode lies in the B plot, Luoxana's scenes with Odo. Surprisingly layered and tender, these moments peel back vulnerabilities on both sides. Trapped in a turbo lift, we see Luoxana at her most compassionate and Odo at his most exposed. His discomfort with his shape-shifting nature and his need to revert to a liquid state is treated with real sensitivity, and Luoxana, often dismissed as flamboyant comic relief, becomes a source of quiet understanding and dignity. That scene is easily one of DS9's early emotional standouts. The A-plot, he says, involving a mysterious computer program that causes havoc on the station, feels more like standard Star Trek fare. It turns out that a probe from the Gamma Quadrant uploaded some kind of learning software into the station's systems. Not a sentient being exactly, but a sophisticated, possibly experimental AI. There's no strong indication that it's a conscious life form or part of a deliberate first contact attempt. Rather, it behaves like a malfunctioning program from an unknown species. It's very by the numbers, the kind of plot TNG might have solved in 15 minutes, and with more finesse. But here, it takes a while because the show makes note mainly through O'Brien how this space station is a far cry from the polished and standard Federation stations or starships. Still, it's serviceable as a backdrop and allows the character work to shine. Luoxana Troi is arguably at her best here, he says. The one-note comedic pestering is scaled back, and what we get instead is someone who's self-aware, empathetic, and refreshingly open-hearted. Her interaction with Odo, especially, offers one of the series' most quietly resonant moments so far. The Forsaken may not stand out for its sci-fi plot, but it delivers where it counts, in deepening character relationships and adding emotional layers. It's a great reminder that sometimes the most meaningful stories happen in the quiet corners, not the control room. Yes, definitely. And I would say that Luoxana, probably because she's not in close proximity to her daughter or Picard, or Riker for that matter, because she's not in close proximity to them, her stories take on a different tone. Although I'll say this. She's going to appear in season 7 of TNG, and that's the heaviest one. And when I say heavy, I mean like really heavy. Just looking forward, just looking ahead to that one. Her appearances are going to be a lot less comic relief and a lot more intense, especially that one. That episode of TNG in season 7, the most intense by far. No question about it. But you'll get there soon enough. Pretty soon, actually, because you're going to go back to TNG season 7, I think, here in the not too distant future. But let's get to the last two episodes in this particular episode, because you had 6 that you talked about here. And let's get to this one, episode 18, Dramatis Personae, which you didn't have a whole lot to say about. You said, so it's mutiny then. This episode was fun to watch, leaning into the Star Trek tradition of having an installment where the crew acts completely out of character. Yes, this is very much like Power Play. Although you compared it, you said TNG did it early on with the Naked Now, but this DS9 take feels much stronger because it comes after 17 episodes. By now, we fully know these characters, how they act, and how they think, so watching them go off the rails is far more entertaining. Yeah, you know what? It is closer to the Naked Now, because this is a case where the whole crew goes nuts, as opposed to just a couple members of the crew going nuts because they're possessed. That's a better example, Naked Now. He says the plot involving a telepathic imprint from an ancient power struggle infecting the crew. What makes it work so well is how committed the cast is to their theatrical over-the-top performances. Nana Visitor especially stands out here. She pulls off a ruthless plotting side with such energy that you could easily imagine her playing full-on villain in another story. Remember that, Amr. Remember that. Okay? Remember that. That's all I'm going to say. And that's not even a massive spoiler either. It's just keep that in the back of your mind. How well she plays villain. Just think about that. Anyway, there's also a nice layer of tension that plays on the show's existing power dynamics, he says. Sisko's deliberate and scheming demeanor fits perfectly with the infected personality, while Odo's immunity, explained as being due to his non-humanoid physiology, positions him as the lone voice of reason trying to restore order. It's a bottle episode in scope, but it's charged with fun energy. Yeah, it's definitely one of those, like, fun bottle episodes, like, with respect to what you're talking about. I think that's a good way of putting it. Bottle episode in scope, but charged with fun energy. Yes, for sure. Dramatis Personae. A classic crew has lost their damn minds episode. And that now brings us to the penultimate episode of Season 1 of DS9, Episode 19, Duet. He says, oh my god, what did I just watch? This was a spectacular episode, hands down the best of the season so far, and it might even surpass the two-part premiere. Oh, whoa, really? Better than Emissary? Let's hear what he has to say. Everything was firing on all cylinders, he says. Acting, writing, directing. Harris Yulin, playing the Cardassian initially thought to be Goldar Heel, was phenomenal, absolutely commanding every scene and making each twist hit harder. Yes, Harris Yulin, may he rest in peace. Duet is on a whole different level from most of DS9's first season. For me, it's a near perfect example of Star Trek at its very best, he says. No space battles, no flashy sci fi gimmicks, just a tightly written moral drama that peels back layers of truth, guilt, and identity. Harris Yulin. He's not an actor I'm familiar with, so I don't remember him from anything I've watched before, but he's fantastic in this. He shifts Maritz's demeanor from smug superiority to trembling vulnerability so naturally that you can't help but be drawn in. Nana Visitor matches him beat for beat. Kira's journey from raw hatred toward all Cardassians to a reluctant recognition of Maritz's humanity is beautifully paced. Yeah, as far as Harris Yulin's acting chops, first thing I ever saw him in, he was a judge in Ghostbusters 2. And then he was in Clear and Present Danger with Harrison Ford, which is a Jack Ryan movie. And then he was also in Multiplicity. He's like the doctor that leads, that like does the whole multiplicity thing for Michael Keaton's character. He's a character actor. He's been in a bunch of stuff. He was in a really hilarious episode, a third season episode of Frasier, where he plays this gangster named Jerome Belasco that does a favor for Niles. Yeah, he was a really strong character actor that has a ton of credits to his name. So you won't necessarily see him in anything like, like in a starring role or whatnot, but you'll definitely see him doing character actor work across television and movies in a number of things if you go forward with that. So yeah, may he rest in peace. He passed not too long ago. He says the writing is razor sharp. Every line builds tension until the truth is revealed. Maritza isn't Darheel, but a file clerk burdened with survivor's guilt. And then comes the real gut punch. He deliberately underwent surgery to look like Darheel so he could be captured and tried, hoping it would force Cardassia to confront its crimes against the Bajorans. That constant shift, clerk, Darheel, Maritza pretending to be Darheel, makes the whole episode feel like a moral detective story where each twist deepens the tragedy instead of cheapening it. Yulin's performance sells every layer of the deception, while Nana's visitor work makes Kira's transformation feel gradual and earned. You can see her wrestling with her prejudices in real time, especially in the final scene, where she stops the Bajoran who kills Maritza and shouts, "No, it's not enough." It's pure conviction. No politics, no personal gain, just truth. And that ending, brutal, senseless, and completely lacking in catharsis. Maritza's death flips the revenge narrative on its head, forcing you to confront the reality that justice and vengeance are not the same thing, and that reconciliation is much harder than either. This was perfect television, he says. Not a single wasted scene. Duet is Star Trek at its finest, morally complex, emotionally raw, and still echoing in my head long after the credits rolled. Yeah, Duet's a strong one. Duet is definitely one of the stronger ones in the first two seasons, if not the, arguably the strongest. I don't know if it's better than Emissary, just because I love that two-parter in terms of like setting the table for the franchise, or for this wing of the franchise, if you will. But yeah, I understand your strong feelings for it. It's a really, really well done episode. I recently rewatched it not that long ago on Pluto on the Star Trek DS9 channel, and yeah, no, it's really good, really, really good. One of the better episodes of the franchise, let alone Deep Space Nine in that regard. He says, this concludes my thoughts on DS9 and also marks the end of my email. All in all, it's been a busy but fun stretch of rewatching and reading, from revisiting Guardians Volume 3 and catching up on the latest Spider-Man news to diving into the Hunger Games book and movie, and finally finishing up DS9 Season 1. It's been quite the media marathon. Thanks, as always, for taking the time to read my updates. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on everything when we catch up next. Live long and prosper. Sincerely, Amr Osama. But then, of course, he sent me a message. He actually messaged me on Threads and said, was it too late to send the email? Should he just send it for next week? And I said, no, go ahead and send it, because it was like a day or so ago, which he did. So he sent this second email titled DS9 Season 1 Finale Update. And the summary: Amr shared his thoughts on the DS9 Season 1 finale, In the Hands of the Prophets. He plans to watch TNG's final season and DS9's second season concurrently. Oh, okay, I gotta hear how he's orchestrating this. But he said, hey Ray, hope you're doing well and feeling great. Just sending a quick update on the Season 1 finale of DS9. I finally watched it and naturally have a few thoughts to share. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what he thinks about this, because boy, did he get introduced to an antagonist slash villain in this episode. Episode 20, In the Hands of the Prophets. This is the season finale of the first season, he says, and as season finales go, it's another strong episode. While nothing has quite topped episode 19 yet, perhaps season 2 will deliver multiple episodes that surpass it. Perhaps. We'll see how it goes. It's all subjective. He says, as a finale, In the Hands of the Prophets does a solid job of wrapping up themes while setting up future conflicts, even if it doesn't reach the emotional heights of Duet. What stands out most is how the episode tackles Bajoran culture and religion, particularly through the tension between Kira and Vedic Wynn versus school teachers like Keiko O'Brien trying to introduce secular education. This is classic DS9, not a space adventure, but a grounded story about ideology, authority, and the clash between tradition and progress. It's also rare for Star Trek to confront religion so directly. The last time religion was front and center was TNG Season 6, Episode 23, Rightful Heir. Yes, the Kalis episode, with Worf dealing with that. He says here the episode fully embraces the political and religious tensions within Bajoran society, and decades later it still feels highly relevant. The story highlights the clash between traditional Bajoran beliefs and secular educational efforts, mirroring real-world conflicts over faith, authority, and cultural tradition. The episode also emphasizes character rather than spectacle. Kira's deep devotion and loyalty to Bajoran traditions clash naturally with Sisko's role as a Starfleet officer and mediator, while Keiko and O'Brien represent secular perspectives. Secondary characters and even the students are given moments of depth, showing they're more than just plot devices. This focus on internal and interpersonal conflict gives the episode emotional resonance without action or space battles, even without action or space battles. By embracing the religious and political dimensions of Bajoran society, the episode mirrors real-world power struggles. The manipulation, behind-the-scenes tension, and clash between personal belief and institutional authority echo Vatican-centered dramas like Angels and Demons or Conclave, though DS9 transposes it into a sci-fi setting. The result feels both grounded and timeless, a story about ideology and culture rather than explosions. Unlike many TNG finales, he says, which often ended with big galaxy-shaking cliffhangers, this episode is thematic and character-driven. It wraps up the immediate conflict over education and religious authority while laying the groundwork for possible future arcs. It's a quieter way to close the season, but it works, showing that DS9 prioritizes character, culture, and ideology over spectacle. I will tell you, though, Amr, that's the last time they're going to do that. Because going forward, each season of DS9 ends traditionally in the more explosive manner, and you'll see why. From the moment season 2 ends, everything changes, and you'll see exactly why, and you'll understand exactly what the change is and where this show is headed. I look forward to seeing you get there. But you said, in sum, as the first season finale, In the Hands of the Prophets delivers a strong, grounded story. It tackles religion and political tension front and center, highlights key characters' conflicts and growth, and remains highly relevant decades later. It's not about grand cliffhangers or space battles, but about ideology, morality, and culture, and it closes the season on a thoughtful, impactful note. Yes, it does. And you have been introduced to Vedic Wynn. That is hardly the last you'll see of her, and she may antagonize you while she is antagonizing the rest of the crew of Deep Space Nine going forward. Looking forward to that as well. He says, well, that's it. My first season of DS9 is officially over. My next stop is an adventure I'm really looking forward to, finishing the final season of TNG. Can't believe I'm actually saying that, but it won't be TNG alone. He says I'll be watching the second season of DS9 in tandem. Ideally, I'll do an episode of TNG followed by an episode of DS9, so expect upcoming emails to cover both shows. It's been a long journey with TNG, and I still can't believe it's almost over. I started watching Star Trek back in January, and now almost 9 months later, even though TNG is nearly finished, there's still plenty more to explore with the TNG movies and the remaining seasons of DS9. And then there's Star Trek Voyager, a show I'm really interested in and waiting to get to eventually. All in all, this has been such a fun ride so far. Yes. And he says, live long and prosper, sincerely, Amr Osama. Yes, thank you as always for the feedback, Amr. So, you're going to do the concurrent watch of Season 7 of TNG along with Season 2 of DS9. All right, awesome. So here's the thing. One thing to remember, if I can, structurally speaking, is once you get out of TNG Season 7, right, you're going to go into the TNG movies, right? Now, Generations, I would say, Generations, there's a point where, like, you can watch Generations at any point from up to about the first 4 seasons of DS9, and also the first one or two seasons of Voyager, I would say. This is where the timeline gets a little bit tricky, right? Because TNG will be over, and then Generations came out in 94, right? First Contact came out in 96. But here's the thing. Some things are going to happen in DS9 that are going to change drastically, and they will affect TNG. So, my recommendation is that when you get past season 7 of TNG, right? You're going to be season 7 TNG, season 2 of DS9. Okay, after that, watch Generations at any point. However, don't get to First Contact until after you have reached season 5 of Deep Space Nine. Because certain things, most notably aesthetically, that change within DS9 will affect what you see in First Contact. They will, and it's weird because and the reason this is weird is because at the year that all this aired, the year that all this went down, right? The way that it worked was, it's the fall to spring setup. So a season of Star Trek would start in like October, November, right, or really September, October. It would start September, October, and then it would end in May of the following year, right? So in the case of season 5 of DS9, that started September of 1996, ended May of 1997. Now, in between then, in November of 1996, Star Trek First Contact was released, right? So when you start season 5 of DS9, that's when you should watch First Contact, in my humble opinion, right? And believe me, there are aesthetic things. You'll know when you see it. Trust me. You get to season 5 of DS9, and then watch First Contact, the second TNG movie. Watch Generations at any point in, like during the first 4 seasons of DS9, and that's fine, and that'll work out. And then try and line up First Contact after you watch DS9 season 5. After you start watching DS9, once you start watching DS9 season 5, then you can go ahead watch First Contact. Right? You can even, if you want to wait until maybe like towards a fourth of the way into the season. That would be close to around the time that First Contact released in November of 1996. I remember this. I saw it live. Like I watched the show live, obviously, and I went and saw the movie at the theater, right? But that's where the timeline gets tricky. And then with respect to Voyager, I will say this. Star Trek Voyager, if I remember correctly, the first season of that was in 95, right? So that would be during, here, I'm trying to think, is that season 3 of DS9? Or is it season 4? I'm trying to remember. Let's see. Season 3, can we type? Let's see. The DS9 season 3 air dates. September 1994 to June 1995. Okay, so September 1994 to June 95. Okay, so it was even later. It wasn't even May, right? Okay, so then Voyager season 1. I'm trying to line this up for you. Voyager season 1 air dates. Let's see. So that was January 16th, 1995. Okay, so here's the thing. So Voyager will officially kick off once you are into what season? Actually, no, you're in the middle of season 3. So the middle of season 3 of Deep Space Nine is when you can start Voyager. The middle of season 3. That's when you can start Voyager. And really, as far as like timelines and whatnot, like there's not a whole lot of connection other than there's a thing that you're about to be introduced to in season 2 that has direct impact on literally the existence of Star Trek Voyager. A thing is going to happen in the middle of season 2 of Deep Space Nine, which will directly lead to the existence of Star Trek Voyager as a show. Again, you'll know when you see it. When you get to that point, you'll understand. This will all be explained, but just trying to help you navigate a little bit here, right? Because you want to keep going. I got it. And it's going to get a little confusing. It's going to get, like, DS9 and Voyager ran concurrently for a number of seasons, and then the TNG movies were happening as well. So you might reach a point, potentially. You could potentially send me an email where you're talking DS9, Voyager, and TNG movies all in the same email. That could happen. That could happen if you wish to go the concurrent route. You don't have to, but I understand trying to go that route. So just trying to help you balance that. So again, just to recap, don't watch First Contact, which is the second TNG movie, right? Generations is fine. Watch Generations from the moment you finish season 7 of TNG all the way up to about the 4th season of DS9. That's great. Actually, you know what? I just remembered something. Okay, watch Generations before you get to season 4. Watch Generations before you get to DS9 Season 4. A thing that happens in that movie is directly referenced in Season 4's premiere. Right? So, okay. this is where it gets tricky, Amber. I know, I'm sorry. I hope I'm not confusing you. But here we go. One more time. So, you you're watching season 7 of TNG and season 2 of DS9 concurrently. All right, cool. Season 3. Go ahead during season 3 of DS9. At that point, you can start Voyager and like in the middle, and also watch Star Trek Generations, right? And make sure that you have Star Trek Generations watched before you reach season 4 of DS9, because again, something that happens in that movie is going to be directly referenced in the premiere of season 4 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Something and someone. I ain't going any further. And careful with spoilers, because that's a massive spoiler. You may end up getting spoiled on that one later. That's arguably a bigger spoiler potentially than the one that I was talking about earlier. Not necessarily bigger in terms of the grand scope of the story, but in terms of a character, if you will. But yeah, so just make sure you have Generations watched before you reach season 4 of DS9, right? And you can start Voyager in the middle of season 3 at DS9. And then from that point on, watch all of season 4 and then get about a quarter of the way into season 5 of Deep Space Nine before you watch First Contact. Because things that happen in the beginning of season 5 of DS9 will impact, aesthetically speaking, Star Trek First Contact. It will. Most certainly it will. And I think that's cool. And then as far as watching Voyager and DS9 concurrently, like, I think you're fine as far as lineups with respect to that. Well, damn it, kind of. I'm now, you know what? We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. When you get to Voyager, we'll cross that bridge later. But for now, just remember everything that I said, as confusing as it may have been. I'm sorry if I overcomplicated the issue. I'm just trying to get it to line up. It is really tricky. It's some wibbly wobbly timey wimey shit with respect to Star Trek, and I know I just quoted Doctor Who with respect to that. But thank you for your feedback, Amr. As you can tell, this is my favorite franchise, as I've said many times before, and I'm really excited for you to watch through it. And I'm just eagerly awaiting your thoughts and your perspectives on the rest of what you're watching, because man, you're getting into the teeth of this franchise and the belly of it and the heart of it, and it's awesome that it's your first watch and that you can experience all of this. And yeah, it's great. Thank you for your feedback as always. Looking forward to your thoughts on the future episodes as you begin your concurrent watch of season 7 of TNG, final season, and season 2 of DS9. All right, next up, how about some more Blue Sky feedback? Sam Otten posted a response to the last Flight Chat episode, the last feedback that we did. Was it the long one? No, it was the shorter one. That's right. It wasn't the long one. But he had a response with respect to some of his thoughts in the last Flight Chat episode that he posted in a couple of posts on Blue Sky. So I want to read them here real quick. He says, quick clarification after a listener mentioned the cost associated with Peacemaker recasting Vigilante after 5 episodes. Yes, that's right. That was brought up, where they did have to reshoot some things to accommodate Freddie Stroma after the original actor wasn't working. It says Chris Conrad was the original, but his performance wasn't working, and I think Freddie Stroma did really well. But there was a comment about body differences and reshooting everything. He says the actor builds were not super different. In fact, on the Peacemaker podcast, Gunn said they had to find a replacement who fit into the same costume, so Stroma was roughly the same size. They also said they could use much of the masked footage with Stroma just dubbing. They had to reshoot face scenes. That's a good point. There's a decent amount of scenes in Peacemaker Season 1 where Vigilante's wearing the mask, and it can absolutely be dubbed over. So yes, that's a very good point. You're absolutely right. Thank you for pointing that out, Sam. He also says, speaking of Peacemaker, I was not originally expecting to like it, but the show really won me over. I think it's great, and I've watched it twice. I'm very excited for Season 2, even though the whole thing is very different than my beloved Man of Steel and BVS. Like you, I try to keep a wide strike zone. Yes, and I respect that, Sam. I do. And I feel like on some levels, we're kind of on even more of an island, right? Whether we have preferences for the Zack Snyder stuff or not, I feel like there's a lot of people that, whether they mean to draw a line in the sand, I mean, obviously there are those that draw the line in the sand and they make it like toxically obvious on social media, like, oh, this is clearly better because this is shit and this is good. Like, there are people that do that nasty rage baiting nonsense, right? But then there are others who they have a preference and they are still in tuned and will rewatch like the DCEU, but they've tuned out of the DCU. in that regard, right? Or vice versa, where they will, they're tuned into the DCU, but the DCEU is dead to them, right? And I appreciate you and I being part of that island of people that are like, we like both. We enjoy both. Like it's a different level of enjoyment with respect to all of it. And I feel like at the end of the day, not to say that we are like the real DC fans, but I do think that it does make us somewhat stronger DC fans because we do accept multiple interpretations. And look, it's all subjective. People do not have to accept the DCU if they don't like it, if they don't want to, and if they don't like it, right? I had a mutual that's followed me over in the Twitter days, and I think we're mutuals on BLUESKY and on Threads. And he made it abundantly clear on July 11th that he had no interest in seeing Superman because he already got his Superman movie 12 years ago with Man of Steel, right? So, hey, you know what? Listen, and he decided, and part of me wondered if the reason he did this was just to counteract all the stuff he was seeing about Superman on social media. He did a DCEU rewatch and was like very public and very loud about it, right? And just showed absolutely no interest whatsoever in what James Gunn had to bring to the table for the DCU and, just already had bad vibes pre-programmed about Superman. So, you know what? That's his business. There were a couple of times where I was like, okay, I may have to mute him because he was getting a little too negative, and I don't want to, like block or unfriend because I don't think it's quite, the toxicity is still not to that level, in my opinion, and there are still a number of opinions that he and I share with respect to how Man of Steel and the Zack Snyder films and the DCEU in general is treated by a lot of gatekeepers and assholes, like going forward, right? So I said, all right, just put him off to the side. He's going to do what he's going to do. But then recently he decided that he was going to watch Superman now that it was available digitally. And I said, I don't know why you're doing that, man. I like it. I wouldn't have recommended that for you. Yeah, and I still won't recommend it. I don't know why you watched it. Like, he posted a thing yesterday, after watching. He said he was still processing it, but right now he was giving it, what did he say? I want to quote exactly what he said. He said, first of all, his initial post after he watched it was, "It exists." And he posted a gif of Jensen Ackles from Supernatural just like over exaggeratingly chewing on food while somebody else was talking. I think this is a Supernatural scene as well, him and Jared Padalecki. So he just posts, "It exists." And then he responded, it added on, "Need to chew on what I've seen a bit before composing a review. Meanwhile, I'm calling it a barely over the line 5 out of 10. And I told him, I responded to him, I said, I seriously don't know why you watched it, man. You made it clear a month ago that you already got your Superman movie in 2013, and that's fine. There was absolutely no way you were going to dig this film, which is also fine. It's all subjective." And he just said he wanted to know for sure. Okay, you know what? Fine. I think you wasted money. Although knowing him, he probably did not spend money on it. He probably rode the high seas. I don't want to like just immediately say that. Oh well, I don't want to quite assume that, but I wouldn't surprise me if he rode the high seas because I know it's already that usually when a movie gets released digitally, it is available on the high seas as well at the same time. I get it, whichever, but either way, yeah, I wouldn't have recommended you do that. I would not have recommended you do that, truthfully. And he was one of those that was like being really effusive in his praise of Fantastic Four First Steps, and part of me wondered if he was doing that just to spite the DCU and despite like all the people that are supporting the DCU. I don't know. I felt like he could have done that. Maybe it's so difficult with social media to discern context. But that's the type of divide that I'm glad I don't have to deal with. The type of divide where I'm like, you know what, I don't feel that way. I don't feel that strongly with respect to like, oh, I just don't like this, or this direction is not my tempo, and I just feel so strongly about it that I'm gonna go into watching the movie already expecting it to be bad. Like he went into it with a prove to me that you're good mindset, which I do not do. I go into all movies with a prove to me that you're bad mindset, because if I'm watching the movie, I'm expecting to enjoy it in that regard, right? So to me, I don't know why you watched it, but I am not. I don't like navigate myself that way. I am different, and again, it's all subjective, right? Like, it is not a case of I'm not like coming down on him for it. He feels how he feels. Only thing I thought was silly was that he tried watching the movie in the first place. I knew he wasn't going to enjoy it. And at 5 out of 10? No, no, no. Well, why are you watching movies that you're going to give a 5 out of 10? I don't watch movies that I give a 5 out of 10. I don't. And people are like, "Well, Ray, how can you know?" I'll know. Trust me. Like, rarely do I get surprised. If there's a movie that I'm interested in, I'm probably going to enjoy it. Rarely will I ever just blindly be surprised and be like, "Oh wow, I did not like that at all." No, that's only happened. I can count on one hand how many times that's happened. I've only left the theater twice, like in the middle of a movie. That was Dreamcatcher and Killing Them Softly. I can name both movies, and in both cases, I saw another movie to get the taste out of my head. I went and saw The Core. Yes, that's right, the 2003 disaster flick with Hilary Swank and Aaron Eckhart and Delroy Lindo and Stanley Tucci. The Core, terrible movie. I don't care. I needed the taste of Dreamcatcher out of my head. And so I went and saw The Core later that night with my friends. And then with Killing Them Softly, that was a case where I wasn't enjoying it that much. Shonda wasn't enjoying it very much. And so she left the theater. She went to go see about getting refunded, and she actually got tickets exchanged to free passes to Wreck-It Ralph, which started in 20 minutes. And we left the theater in the middle of Killing Them Softly, and we went and saw Wreck-It Ralph, which was the better choice, right? I can count on that's twice in the theater. I can't even, like, if I'm thinking of other movies that I went to go see in the theater and didn't like, I can't think of any immediately, but those are two examples, right? So that doesn't happen with me. Generally speaking, if I watch something or if I'm interested in something, I'm going to enjoy it on some level. Certainly higher than 5 out of 10. So, yeah. Sam, I appreciate the wide strike zone perspective. We are a smaller group, if you will. We're a smaller subset within the rational fans that, either choose sides and are just civil about it, right? They don't go and they don't toxically post about it, or they're a little snarky about it. Like, I'll say that the mutual that I've been talking about that watched Superman gave it a 5 out of 10. I'll say he's not toxic. He's just snarky, right? And I can't blame snark. Snark is different, right? Like, he's not attacking things. He's just posting on his own account in that regard. And he's not being toxic. He's not doing the box office bullshit. He doesn't do that nonsense or anything like that. So that's another reason why I don't wish to eliminate our mutuals connection, if you will, in that regard. But I would have never recommended Superman for him. And the fact that he gave it 5 out of 10, quite honestly, that's a higher score than I thought he was going to give it. Because I would have never told him to watch that movie. But either way, that's, generally speaking, the battle lines that people draw one way or the other for personal reasons. It's all subjective, but I like not having to draw those lines. And clearly, Sam doesn't have to draw those lines either. So salute, Sam. Looking forward to your thoughts on Peacemaker Season 2 as we get into it, because yes, that will be featured on Flightbox after the premiere for the next couple of weeks for sure. But thank you, as always, for the feedback, good sir. All right, next up, Alex De Silva. His email this week titled Flight Chat number 15, Oscars So Boring. The summary says, Alex shared thoughts on the Emmys, the Predator movie series, and Mission Impossible 4. Alex discussed the DCU, questioning the homework concept and suggesting a Superman-Supergirl team-up. He also reviewed the Star Trek TNG episode Remember Me, discussing its plot and preference for serialized shows. Oh, that last part intrigues me, but let's get to it. He says, hey Ray, some random topics, then Star Trek. He says, I've been watching a lot of this year's Emmy nominees, and I've decided that I'm actually going to watch the ceremony on September 14th. It'll be my first time ever watching the Emmys. There's been a lot of talk about the Oscars in recent years just declining in viewership. It appears most people just don't care. Part of my theory for why this is the case is because the victory speeches are, quite frankly, such a bore to sit through. Almost everyone who wins an Oscar spends the entire time at the podium just listing off a bunch of names to thank, most of which are unknown to the general audience. While I can appreciate the sentiment of being grateful to all the people who've helped you win a prestigious award, this certainly doesn't make for exciting TV. I think people would be a lot more interested in tuning into the ceremony if award recipients tried to make their speeches a little more interesting, entertaining, fun. I know that if I were an Oscar nominee, I'd have a speech drafted that did more than just spend 2 straight minutes thanking people, but that's just me. Well, here's what I would say about that, Alex. First of all, I'm not going to blame the actors, because here's the reality of the situation. The Oscars shouldn't be televised. You heard what I said. I'm going to repeat that. The Oscars shouldn't be televised. The reality of the situation is that the Academy Awards are literally a party, a 4-hour-long party that Hollywood gives itself to pat itself on the back and give itself awards. That's literally what it is. My instructor, my department director at Media Arts and Entertainment Technology at Mott told us that years ago, and he's right. He's 100% right. That's what the Oscars are. The Academy, all members of Hollywood, the 6,000 plus members of Hollywood, it's them getting together to celebrate themselves for a job well done. which means that whatever level of pretension, whatever level of atmosphere that is there, whatever level of thanks that they want to give to any of the causes that they support or to any of the people that they work with, right? And remember all the people, like if an actor wins Best Actor or Best Actress, and they want to thank the director, the writer, they want to thank the cast and crew, they want to thank the grips, they want to thank the studio. If they have a lot, they want to thank their mom and dad, their parents, their cousins, their uncles, whoever. They want to thank all those people. They should be able to thank all those people, and they don't. They should be able to do that without a band playing them off just to hit a commercial break. The Oscars should not be televised. The Oscars is really supposed to be a private party for all of the recipients of the Academy. And it's really not on them, in my opinion. It's really on the people, whoever it is that's in charge of the Academy, whoever made the deal with ABC and Disney to televise the stupid thing for the last however many years, because that's the problem. The Oscars are not meant for the general public. They're not meant for the lowest common denominator. That's why when they wanted to do shit like the best popular nominee, like the best popular movie, that was so stupid, because that has nothing to do with any of the aesthetics or any of the actual like critique of films, right? It's got nothing to do with acting. It's got nothing to do with production design. It's got nothing to do with writing. It's got nothing to do with visual effects or music or anything that the Oscars actually awards, anything that's about the actual experience of watching a movie. It was literally about ticket sales. It was literally about box office, and that's ridiculous because that's not what the Academy Awards are about. But they wanted something to attract the viewer, right? And the viewer, more often than not, if they want to get the big ratings, well, that means you have to go after the audience that doesn't like follow these movies or doesn't follow award season that way. Like they'll hear about the big movies. They'll hear about Barbie. They'll hear about Oppenheimer. They'll hear about the Marvel movies and stuff like that, right? But generally speaking, they're trying to attract an audience that is not their audience, that is not their target audience at all. And this is why Oscar ratings have been shit. Like even at their highest, it's still not as big as other, like certainly not sporting events or anything else that gets ABC and Disney better ratings over the year. But they keep trying to chase the lowest common denominator. This is why the stupid slap controversy happened, because they got into this pattern where they're like, okay, we got to hire stand-up comedians, and everybody tried to be provocative, right? The Golden Globes tried this, right, with Ricky Gervais, and that blew up in their face. Hollywood Foreign Press, because he torched them, because he's a shit stand-up comedian in the first place, and not a really good human being either. That's just my subjective opinion. And if you like Ricky Gervais, hey, it's all subjective. I do not, for a number of reasons. I don't think he's a good person. I think he says a lot of dumb shit. Some things he says are good, but he's an arrogant prick, in my opinion. Either way, they got into this habit of hiring stand-up comedians and basically not to present the awards, but to turn the damn thing into a roast. And you're not there to roast anybody. This isn't Comedy Central. It's literally the Academy celebrating itself for a job well done over the year. They're allowed to have a party like that. So the idea of hiring a stand-up comedian like Chris Rock or Amy Schumer or anybody else to just poke fun and make jokes at people for 4 hours, that's bullshit. This isn't a roast, right? We don't need, flipping Lisa Lampanelli and, Jeff Ross and all those other fools that do the celebrity roast. If you want to do a celebrity roast, do a celebrity roast. Do it on Comedy Central. That's not what the Oscars are. But Disney and ABC angled toward that because they're still trying to get the lowest common denominator who doesn't follow award season to watch the Oscars. It's stupid. It's dumb. It's never made sense to me, and I don't like it. So quite honestly, it shouldn't be televised. So, I don't give a shit about an Oscar nominee having a speech drafted where they're thanking everybody under the sun. They should be allowed to do that because they worked hard. And, in their definition of working hard, right? We're not comparing their work to, what other people do in other vocations. But I'm saying in their vocation, they put a lot of their own talent, blood, sweat, and tears, whatever, into that movie, along with the cast and crew. And if they want to thank everybody that helped them out on some tough days, or, stood by them, or, got them the script that, won them the great contract, or got them the great notoriety in order to move their careers forward, then they should be able to do that without us at home talking about, wow, these things are so boring. Yeah, they're supposed to be, because they're not meant for us. They're not targeted for the general audience in that regard. So that the Oscars shouldn't be televised. I've said that a couple of times, and I will continue to say that. The Oscars should not be televised. Or, you know what? They should be streamed for those of us that actually give shit. Like, put it on the Criterion channel. You know what? That'd be perfect. Put the Oscars on the Criterion channel. Streaming, right? Criterion has a channel that streams movies and shows all the time. Like, put that on the Criterion channel. It shouldn't be on flippin' broadcast TV. It's dumb. the lowest common denominator, and the people that don't follow the Oscars don't need to be watching the damn awards. And they should not have any input, in my opinion, on what the awards should be, because the awards are not a TV spectacle. They're supposed to be Hollywood giving a party for itself, right? Giving awards to itself, right? And I'm fine with that. I'm cool with that. The TV ratings thing, I think, degrades and dilutes the whole experience, the whole event, in my opinion. That's how I feel about that. So, no, it's not exciting TV. We shouldn't be watching it, truthfully, unless you're somebody that that feels the way that I do, truthfully, and understands that the Oscars, what the Oscars are for what they are, and is willing to be okay with the speeches being long-winded and thanking so and so and da 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 da, right? Like that. I enjoy that shit. I do. I'm not kidding. I do enjoy that shit. And I hate when the damn orchestra plays them off because they have some emotional moments. People have cried getting Oscars. Halle Berry lost her shit and cried like a baby when she won for Monsters Ball many years ago because of how poignant of an Oscar win that was, right? That was a big deal, right? Like there was a big deal when, Spike Lee, Jamie Foxx, and others got emotional when they won Oscars, right? And that kind of shit I enjoy, right? I don't think that's boring. I don't think that that's, whatever. But again, I'm not part of the general audience, right? It's made for people. The Oscars really are made for people like me that are like film nerds about the production side of it and about the actual like machinations of how Hollywood works. But that's not everybody. It's not even a majority of the audience. So one more time, the Oscars shouldn't be televised. They should be able to do what they're doing without television ratings coming into the picture. I think that's stupid on ABC and Disney's part, in my opinion. They don't. How much do they even make from that? Yeah, it should be abandoned as far as network television broadcast is concerned. It should go to streaming. They should stream it on the Criterion channel. Those are my thoughts with respect to that. So either way. So yeah, I'm not going to blame them for the speeches being boring or what they are, or boring for you. I'm going to blame ABC and Disney for televising the damn thing to the general audience that is not their target audience in the first place. I mean, it is their target, but it's not the Oscars target, right? It's not the people that the Academy Award is actually speaking to in that regard. But that's just me. So those are just my thoughts with respect to that. So getting to the rest of your email, you said, I recently watched Predator Killer of Killers, which is an anthology movie of predators interacting with warriors from different time periods in Earth history. This was really cool, and I was not expecting the final 30 minutes of this movie to be what it was. Between Prey and this movie, I really like the recent resurgence in the Predator series. I have no idea what Badlands is about, but I don't quite care, rather. I'm all in if it's anywhere near the quality of the previous two movies. Well, it's still Dan Trachtenberg, so yeah, Dan Trachtenberg did Prey. And from what I've heard, yeah, everybody that has watched the Killer of Killers and also Prey, which I've not watched either of those. I need to get caught up, and I will, because I want to see Badlands. I do, because the trailer for Badlands looks awesome, and I I've already been made aware of at least a part of what happened in in the last 30 minutes of Killer of Killers, and so I am intrigued. I do want to get caught up. I do like the Predator series, right? Same with the Alien series in that regard, right? So yeah, I will get caught up on that. But yeah, I think Badlands. I think the expectation is that it's going to be the quality of the last two movies. So for sure. He says, I recently watched Mission Impossible 4 Ghost Protocol. The series was already good, but with Ghost Protocol, these movies reach new heights, pun intended. This is when the series went from good to great, and from this point onward, it just feels like the movies get better and better with each one. And of course, it's insane that Cruise actually climbed the side of the Burj Khalifa. Yes, he was harnessed in real life, but that makes it no less impressive. I don't care how much safety equipment you put on me, you couldn't ever get me to scale the side of that building. Yeah, me neither. But I think most people do agree with you, Alex, that Ghost Protocol was a turning point. And the funny part is that was Brad Bird that directed that one. That was the only one that he directed. McQuarrie took over right after that for Rogue Nation and has done the rest of the series since then. Rogue Nation, Fallout, Dead Reckoning, and Final Reckoning. Right, he did the last four. And me, of course, as I've said before, 3 to me is the turning point where the series really found its footing and really built upon. I feel like Ghost Protocol and all the McQuarrie films build upon what Abrams started in 3. But 4, I'll tell you what, 4, I probably mentioned this before and I'll bring it up again with Ghost Protocol. That is the infamous scenario where Shonda and I went to the theater, and I want to say this was the same movie where she smuggled in Qdoba, which was great. That was awesome. But this was also the movie where I bought a raspberry vanilla Coke from the dispenser and had to go to the bathroom not once but twice during the movie. And to this day, that still infuriates me. And that's where my rule of not getting concessions during the first watch of the movie comes from, because I'm not doing that. Like that was awful. That was terrible. My bladder was it disappointed me that day, unfortunately, but it is what it is. That may be TMI, but yeah, I wasn't happy about that. But Ghost Protocol is quite good. I'm with you on that. And the tension and the whole thing with him and the Burj Khalifa, yeah, that's where that started. The crazy stunt shit. That's really where it started with that movie, and then he's just upped the ante with each one for all the crazy shit that he's done during the McQuarrie era, for sure, when he had to start signing liability releases in order to get it done. Yes, indeed. So continuing, he says, so Gunn's made a lot of comments recently, including the revelation that the reason Superman is already on digital is to guarantee that people can watch it before Peacemaker Season 2. This all but confirms that Superman and or the events of his movie are going to factor into Peacemaker. That's all well and good for me, despite Gunn's insistence that there won't be a homework problem in the DCU. Oh, here we go. Alex says, if there's really no homework in the DCU, why is Gunn and DC Studios making it such a point to explain they want audiences to watch Superman before Peacemaker? For that matter, how is it a homework problem to watch Superman before the new Peacemaker season? Superman is a great movie. Homework is only a problem when it's stuff that is irrelevant and or of low quality. The real point I'm getting at, he says, is that I'm already tired of all this fandom talk of homework for the DCU. Heck, I want connective tissue between the projects. It's a connected universe. That's what makes connected universes rewarding. Audience members who don't watch all projects know that they're not going to understand every single reference and have likely made their peace with that. Who cares if there's homework or not? People like you and me are going to watch all this stuff anyway and gladly do the homework, especially if it's all good stuff. Okay, here's the thing, and I'm really gonna try and be as diplomatic when I say no. You know what? I'm just gonna be raw. Alex, you're creating the homework problem yourself, and the reason I say that is because you're the one that keeps bringing it up. You're the one that keeps referencing that it is a homework problem at all. It's not. Because here's the thing, like homework problem, that is a completely subjective phrase. 1000%. And you just admitted why. Because here, I will reread what you just said. You said that audience members who don't watch all projects know that they're not going to understand every single reference and have likely made their peace with that. Who cares if there's homework or not? You do, Alex. You clearly care, and you're caring about it too much. If it's something that bothers you, in my opinion, you're caring about it way too much. Because the reality of the situation is that Gunn probably said that because, as he said earlier, he thought Peacemaker Season 2 was dropping later. He thought it was dropping in September. Turns out it's in August. Now, even though you're the creative head of DC Studios, there's certain things with respect to production and release, and certainly in terms of HBO Max, because he's not in charge of HBO Max, Casey Blaze is. There's certain things that he can't, avoid, right? And maybe he did actually think, well, crap, I thought we'd have another month, a bite at the apple, let me release it sooner. Or more than likely, David Zaslav and Warner Brothers Discovery is following what I said the other day in FLITEcast, where I talked about how Warner Brothers this year has made a habit of releasing their films digitally between day 30 and day 45 of release. They've been waiting a month or a month and a half. They did that with Minecraft, released that digitally on day 35. They did it with Sinners, releasing that on day 45 or 47 digitally. And they kept those movies in theaters for another 40 to 50 days after that, right? Minecraft and Sinners had 80 plus day release schedules, and Superman's probably going to have the same. So these were decisions that were probably outside of Gunn's purview as far as when the digital release was going to happen. But from a marketing standpoint, what does he say? He doesn't say, well, this is what David Zaslav wanted me to do. This is what the studio wanted me to do. No, he tells you that he wants people to be able to watch Superman before watching Peacemaker Season 2. And you're interpreting that as homework. And you are honestly making a bigger problem for yourself. The second you decide to stop talking about a homework problem, the homework problem will go away. Believe me on that. Because here's the deal. All he has told us about Peacemaker Season 2 is that it will introduce characters that we've already seen from Superman and other characters that will pop up for the rest of the DCU. He's basically told us that Peacemaker Season 2 is going to be a world-building show. And You can continue to focus on the idea that that world building is going to be threads and plot lines that make homework a necessity because we'll have had to have seen Peacemaker season 2 in order to understand shit. Or you can just simply look at it as, well, we're going to have some characters and we're going to have some, you can take it at face value. We're going to have some characters, we're going to have some people that are going to tie things in together and show that at the very least, these movies and shows are all happening in the same universe, but it's not a necessity to have watched them in that regard, right? Say somebody doesn't watch Superman and they watch Peacemaker season 2. They're still going to meet Guy Gardner Green Lantern. They're still going to meet Hawkgirl, right? They're still going to see Superman because he's going to be in it. Superman's going to be there. They're going to see them. And maybe, and I guarantee, a good amount of people that want to see Peacemaker season 2 or watch Peacemaker season 2 but hadn't seen Superman yet, they will watch the show and go, well, shit, I need to watch Superman now, right? It's all about hype. It's all about marketing from that perspective. And Gunn saw a marketing opportunity. And whether, whatever bureaucratic, whatever like organizational stuff came down the pipe with respect to why Superman was released the way that it was, again, I think it's just Warner Brothers finding a pattern as far as the balance between their successful films and their digital releases. And you know what? As I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about box office during John's email, I mentioned how, with respect to Superman's box office, it got a bump. It bumped back up. It was at 880,000 on Thursday domestically, and then it made $1.6 million on Friday, this past Friday, the 15th, and then it made another $2.2 million on Saturday. This is after the digital release happened, right? So this is a marketing thing, Alex. That's what this is. It's all marketing. And it's only a homework problem if we make it one, subjectively speaking, in that regard. Because I still do not believe, and I still have not seen any evidence that tells us there's going to be anything like the Infinity Saga or plot lines that we're going to have to know. So quite honestly, Alex, if you don't want there to be a homework problem, stop focusing on it. I mean that. Subjectively speaking, stop focusing on a homework problem because you keep hearing what he's saying and you keep interpreting it the way that you choose to interpret it. All you got to do is what the general audience is doing. Ignore it. Dismiss it. Because you've already seen Superman. So what does it matter? It really shouldn't affect you at all, Alex. You've seen Superman already, which means that when you watch Peacemaker season 2, you're already set. The digital release wasn't necessary for you. Now, it would have helped you. Like, say you hadn't been able to see it. Say you were and your wife. Say the circumstances, the great circumstances that your family helped you out so that you and your wife could go see it. Say that hadn't happened. And you had to be home with the baby, right? The brand new baby, which hope she's doing well, right? Hope the family's doing well, of course. Say those circumstances didn't allow you to see it in the theater. Well, now here, the digital release allows you to see it. And that's really the bigger thing here, right? The digital release allows people that are in your circumstance or similar circumstances that can't go to the theater to see it now. And of course, James Gunn wants you to watch Peacemaker season 2 as well because it's all part of the same franchise. He wants continued success for the franchise. This is marketing. This is what the creative head of the franchise is supposed to say. He's supposed to tell you. He's supposed to get you from one project to the next. And instead of putting in mid and post-credit scenes, which again, I guess you would prefer those because you had said that before in terms of you don't want them to waste your time with mid and end credit scenes. Instead of doing it that way, he's doing it the marketing way. He's doing it with these press releases. He's doing it talking to Entertainment Weekly and Deadline and Variety and Brandon Davis and all those people, right? He's doing it that way. And I'm not going to fault him for doing his job. The bottom line of it is, if you're sick of the homework talk, then ignore it. Dismiss it. Because he hasn't said homework. You have. You're interpreting what he's saying as homework. And to me, all I'm seeing is, here, the bigger quote, and I talked about this on FLITE the other day. The bigger quote is what Craig Gillespie said when he said that Gunn told him to treat each of their movies as a different graphic novel series in a comic run. Is that also a homework problem, Alex? Because, when I decided to read all 97 issues and tie-ins of Civil War, I didn't have to. I could have just read the main book, which that's what I did with Flashpoint. Flashpoint, I still haven't read the tie-ins. But with Civil War, I wanted to read all the tie-ins because I wanted to see how Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and everybody else was connected into the story. But I didn't have to, right? That's what we're talking about here. A case where Superman was a book that we just saw, and now Peacemaker is its own book, right? And then next year, we're going to have Lanterns be a book, and then we're going to have Supergirl be a book, and we're going to have Clayface be a book. And whether you read all the books or not, they're all going to take place in the same continuity. They're all going to take place in the same run, right? You know, we can call it the DCU run, right? You know, they've got Silver Age, they've got New 52, they've got Rebirth. Now we can call this the DCU. That's the point. It's a run. And it will have several books in its run. You don't have to watch all of them. You don't. You just don't. But he wants you to. He's the boss. He wants you to watch all of them. So again, not a homework problem. Marketing. If the marketing bugs you, then just stop thinking of it as a homework problem, because you're the one thinking of it as a homework problem. I am not thinking of it as a homework problem. Like, I'm thinking of it as, oh, I'm curious to see how this goes, right? Because again, I've seen nothing to indicate that he's taking the MCU position on this. And I don't agree with you, still, that the homework problem is inevitable. I don't agree with that. Especially since I'm at this point now where you are creating the homework problem for yourself if you keep harping on it. Like, that is your choice to continue, like, reinforcing the idea that it is a homework problem. Because as far as I'm concerned, Superman appearing in Peacemaker Season 2 doesn't mean, oh, man, I'm so glad I watched Superman or I would have missed something vital. No, what it's going to mean is I'm going to see the connection, and it's going to be cool to see the connection. Just like how it was cool to see Peacemaker in Superman because the connection was already reverberated, if you will, in that regard. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about so Peacemaker being in Superman. So I was like, well, now I have to watch Peacemaker Season 2. No, you don't. No, you don't. You do not have to watch Peacemaker Season 2. You can, and there may be some context with respect to characters and whatnot that happens and how the world builds, but it's not required. It's not like the Infinity Saga, where stones are being introduced and plot lines are being, like, put forth, and a character is being teased. No, it's not going to be the same, at least on the outset so far. The way that it's been described, I'm not detecting a homework problem. And look, I realize I'm talking to fans here. I get it. You're a fan. I'm a fan. And we tend to make things more complicated than they need be. We just do. Because we overthink and we think about a lot. But I tell you, if the homework problem bothers you this much, stop thinking about it. Seriously. Take the word homework out of your head. Because that's how you're choosing to approach it. And you have better control over your emotions than that. I know you do. I do. And we should, as human beings in this regard. So, it's PR. James Gunn wants you to watch everything. He knows you're going to watch everything. So treating it like a homework problem is on you. And on any of us in that regard. Which is why I'm not treating it as such in that regard. I mean, it's never homework for me. Even with the MCU, it's not homework for me technically. Because I'm going to watch every damn movie. It don't matter. I'll have all the context. Because that's just how I operate. And for those who don't care to watch everything, they're, like you said, they've made peace with it. So the homework problem is only on your end. And if you want to be done with it, then be done with it. That is your choice in that regard. So continuing on, he says, so Gunn has hinted that Superman's next movie appearance isn't exactly going to be Superman 2. I think a Superman-Supergirl team-up movie might not be out of the question, which, hey, I'm all for it. Yeah, and there are people suggesting that because in the documentary Adventures in the Making of Superman, there is an image, like part of the design, part of the conceit of the documentary is that he has these storyboards that he hand drew that kind of explain things that he's narrating, and he talked about that, and there is an image where it is a drawing of Superman, Supergirl, and Krypto, and it looks like they're about to, preparing to fly, and just below them is an image of something or someone that really looks like the top half of Brainiac's head. And so this has led people to speculate that Brainiac is going to be the next villain, right? It's also led people to speculate what you just said, a Superman-Supergirl team-up. And the Superman Saga certainly suggested a team-up could occur, or that at least it's going to be something along the lines of the Kryptonians, which, hey, fantastic. And so this leads to your next question. Is the Superman Saga a subset of Gods and Monsters? Could it be possible that this Superman Saga is a pivot that Gunn is making after the positive critical reception to the Superman movie? Either or both, certainly. And truthfully, Gods and Monsters, if that's the run that we're talking about here within the DCU, right? If we're talking about Gods and Monsters being that run, then yeah, I mean, there are subsets. There are smaller events that occur in comic books. I feel like, Alex, that's how we should be treating this. That's seriously how we should be treating this until we see otherwise. We should be treating this no differently than we treat comic runs and different mini events inside of comic runs. There were events that happened inside of Rebirth. There were events that happened inside of New 52 and Crisis and all the other runs that have happened in DC Comics history, and that's what we're looking for here. That's what this is here with respect to homework, with respect to any of the designations of what is going on in that regard. So, yeah, that is the best way that I can put it. That is the strongest way that I can put it in that regard. And I say bring it on because as a Batman fan, I can be patient and let Superman fans have their day in the sun. They've deserved it after 47 years of being jerked around and only having 4 cinematic actors playing Superman since 1978 and having so many massive gaps in between Superman solo films. So bring on the Superman Saga. I said that the other day too. All right, let's get to Star Trek. He said, this week for The Next Generation, I watched Remember Me, which was a pretty solid episode. My reaction to the first 10 to 15 minutes of this episode, what the heck is happening? Yep. Oh, definitely. He says, this is actually the kind of Star Trek episode that I love. It all starts off with a juicy mystery and an interesting sci-fi concept gets explored in the episode 2, which in this case was the alternate parallel reality. I will say, though, this was another case where a previously on would have been helpful since I have no memory whatsoever of this Traveler character. I'm also a little confused as to the particulars of how Beverly got back to the real world, but I was more just enjoying the vibe of the episode than sweating the nitty-gritty details. Okay, so just to clarify, first of all, Beverly was not in a parallel universe. She was in a warp bubble that was mimicking a parallel universe, but that's why everybody was vanishing, because it wasn't a real universe that she was in. And so the Traveler, of course, that goes all the way back to Where No One Has Gone Before, the 6th episode of TNG all the way back in the first season. Now, again, what you're talking about in terms of a previously on, not a concept they had in the 80s, or in this case, the 90s. This would have been 1990, I think, was when this episode aired. So, yeah, the previously on that you're talking about, that is a modern television conceit, not something from back in the day. I mean, they do previously ons, but only for an episode that was like previously, like, you know, the episode prior, if they did like a 2-parter, not harkening 3 seasons back to the beginning of the show, not that far back. Nowadays, you would see that, right? Like, and we've seen this with the Star Trek shows on Paramount Plus now, right? Where they will do it previously on and they'll harken back to something that happened to see a character that was introduced to something that happened a season or 2 prior, right? This happens a lot now. It did not happen then. So I would say that you want a modern solution to an old school situation. And you know what? It is what it is. That is your preference. I will just give you a heads up that the Traveler and things surrounding him and Wesley will come up again later on in the show. So just keep that in mind. But here's a question. He says, do you generally prefer procedural or serialized shows? Star Trek is a very procedural style show where most episodes tell a singular encapsulated story. That's all well and good, but for me, that makes it tougher to binge this show. When I finish an episode, I usually don't have a burning desire to see more since I just experienced a complete story. If this were a more serialized show, I'd definitely burn through a lot more episodes at once. Case in point, I couldn't wait to start Season 4 right away when I just finished Season 3, just a random thought I had while the credits were rolling. Next episode is called Legacy. Also, going back to Remember Me for a second, this is unrelated, but the title of that episode reminds me of a song from the Pixar movie Coco. Make sure to have a box of tissues handy when you watch that one. Live long and prosper, Alex. Alex, I've seen Coco, and I agree. It's definitely a Pixar tearjerker, most certainly. With respect to your question, do I prefer procedural or serialized? I like both. I can't really say that I have a preference for one or the other. I will say that procedurals, I personally have a better tendency to rewatch those because I don't feel like I'm on the hook to keep going in succession. Like, I haven't rewatched really much serialized shows because, like, the plot lines go through, like, the entirety of a season or the entirety of a show, and it's like, they don't always hold that much rewatch value for me. However, I will tell you this. If you're looking for serialized Star Trek, because your position right now is polar opposite to diehard Trekkies, who for the last number of years have been clamoring for procedural and episodic more than serialized, which is why Strange New Worlds is an episodic series. But Star Trek from DS9 on up to Discovery has been heavily serialized. Even Voyager, in many cases, was serialized, even though they had bottle episodes as well. So I would just say, get to DS9. When you get to DS9, that's when the serialized stuff will massively kick in, especially Season 3 on. Amr is working on that now. He's about to start Season 2. But, like, yeah, Season 3 of DS9 on, heavily serialized. And that's the franchise for like the next 20 some odd years as far as structure between that and episodic. So yeah, you're just not there yet. You're not at the serialized era of Star Trek yet, but it very much exists and is very much a strong part of the franchise for a number of years. So just hang in there, I guess. Like power through TNG. And then once you get to DS9, then we'll get to more of the serialized stuff that you enjoy further. So that's all I would say about that. But as always, thank you for the feedback. Greatly appreciated, Alex, indeed. And finally, we'll close out this week's episode with an email from Jared Cardos. He says, "Hey Ray, hope you're doing well. Wanted to throw out some quick thoughts on your recent flight alert and some of the things mentioned there. First, that YouTube comment is pretty funny. Yes, I was told by a YouTuber to please do not watch Creature Commandos because I'll hate DC after I watch it. And Jared says, first, while there are things I can critique about Creature Commandos, I certainly wouldn't call it unwatchable or that it ruins anything. Second, whoever posted that must be new because I feel like comments that telling you not to watch something just make you go, I'm going to start doing it even harder. And he posted this is what's it, Michael Scott, right? This is Steve Carell's character from The Office. It looks like he's talking to Pam or somebody, and it's a meme. The caption is, I'm going to start doing it even harder. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. When someone says, don't watch this, it's like, well, no, I'm going to watch it. Especially if they're being all subjective, like, it's going to ruin DC for you. No, it's not. It most certainly is not. So, yeah, you're right, Jared. That is precisely my mindset. As soon as I read it, I was like, I wish I could watch this today. But he says, anyway, on the idea of a Superman saga in general, it's definitely an interesting one. I can definitely see something like that working with this first movie as the start. Superman himself is compelling enough, but there's also the Daily Planet, especially Lois and Jimmy, who could pull off a series or movie. Then there's Supergirl, he says, who's getting her own movie and could probably do more if successful. Also, considering Gunn has already tried cloning Superman and has tried to clone himself in Mr. Handsome, there's some groundwork for Connor Kent / Superboy to show up. There's just a lot of different characters and concepts that Gunn could pull from just from the Superman line alone. It should be interesting to see just how much he does with them and how they'll fit with the rest of his Gods and Monsters ideas he's talked about before. Yeah, the possibilities, like he can go he can go in a couple different directions with respect to the Superman saga, which of course, as I said earlier, will be, obviously a subset of Gods and Monsters. But yeah, there's more than a few different directions he can go in. But the bottom line, I think, Jared, is that Superman is front and center. Superman's house is getting in order finally from a cinematic standpoint where, Superman fans don't have to wait 12 and 19 years in between solo movies, for Superman, especially ones within the same continuity. It's still one of the biggest travesties of the DCEU and how it was so badly fumbled by Warner Brothers is the fact that we only had one solo Superman film. 15 films, from 2013 to 2023, 15 films in 10 years, one Superman solo film. Unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. Ridiculous. So, yeah. The fact that he is taking steps to ensure that shit doesn't happen again, very admirable, very commendable, for sure. Jared says, as for the Brainiac drawing that people are pointing at as a hint at the next Superman villain, considering the context of it in the documentary, which was really cool to see, I think he was just there to show all the different characters that were part of those Superman family books he read as a kid. That said, I would not at all be surprised if he shows up in a future movie. I don't know when he's going to show up, but I do think he's going to show up. I do think we're going to finally see Brainiac. And one of the things we talked about the other night on Vodka Stream was how Brainiac was always on the cusp of being the next villain. Like they wanted to do it as the next villain for DCEU. They wanted to do it at some point during the Christopher Reeve films, and that didn't materialize the way that they wanted it to. He was going to be the next villain in Superman Returns, or after Superman Returns, there was a sequel to that. So they've always come this close to doing a live-action Brainiac villain in the Superman films, and we've only ever had one live-action interpretation of Brainiac, which was so well played by Blake Ritson on Krypton for those 2 seasons. So yeah, I think we're going to see Brainiac. I don't know when, I don't know how far down the road, but I don't know if it's going to happen in this particular Superman saga, but I do think that we will see Brainiac at some point down the road in the DCU if things continue to succeed for the franchise and for DC Studios. I absolutely believe that. He says, I would also be super jazzed to see Robbie and Elba come back as Harley and Bloodsport. I could see them coming up in Peacemaker Season 2, though I'm not going to hold that as an expectation, It sounds like there's at least one movie making the rounds that could feature Harley. Zach Kreger, who recently made the movies Barbarian and Weapons, has talked about having an idea for a DC movie that would be about a henchman working in Gotham City who would get involved with the Joker and Harley Quinn. It sounds like the man who killed Batman from Batman the Animated Series, but in live action, and that could be really cool to see. And I think that's enough for me on this one. Until next time. Well, Jared, thank you for the feedback. And yes, we've been talking a great deal about Zach Kreger's idea. Now it is important to note that this is a pitch that he's going to make to DC Studios, and that he probably brought this up in the middle of his press for Weapons as a way to get the idea out there, as a way to whet the appetites and maybe get him some positioning when he pitches this idea to James Gunn, assuming he hasn't already, right? So there's nothing set in stone, and this is certainly not part of the original plan, if you will, for James Gunn's Gods and Monsters, for the DCU in that regard. So he's pitching this idea. So I think we're definitely very much in the conceptual stages of whether or not this idea would even happen, let alone casting a Joker and a Harley Quinn for that. But with respect to the idea of Harley and Bloodsport showing up in Peacemaker Season 2, I hope so. I'm with you, but I'm not going to hold that as an expectation. We just know that there's going to be cameos, and apparently there's going to be a big one, right? Gunn has teased a big one that's going to happen like towards the end or whatever, right? And it could be Robbie, could be Idris. He has said that he wants to bring Bloodsport and find a way to get him back into the franchise. We'll see. And then he says the whole Harley thing will be revealed down the road, right? So, yeah, I want them both back. Like I said in Flight Alert the other day, I'm hoping that the connections to his Suicide Squad film allow it to happen and allow those two to be brought back for their respective characters in the DCU. I'm hoping for it, fingers crossed, but my expectations are not there as well. And I know that I may be getting my hopes up with respect to the idea of like rooting for it, but I'm still going to root for it. I'm still going to hope that it happens. We will see. I feel like we're going to get introduced to characters that we've already known from Superman himself included. We're going to get introduced to some new characters, some recasts, and maybe a couple of others, if you will, that we saw in the Suicide Squad that will be brought over. So, we're days away from the premiere of Peacemaker Season 2, and then for the next 8 weeks, it'll be front and center. We'll be focusing on that on HBO Max, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of revelations, plenty of things to talk about, plenty of things to discuss with respect to all that is going on with that series and the future implications for the rest of the DCU going forward. So, thank you as always for the feedback, Jared. It is indeed greatly appreciated. And that is going to do it for this week's episode of Flight Chat. Got a little bit over 2.5 hours, I think largely because of Amar's email. He had a lot to cover, indeed, a lot of ground to cover for many things. But either way, thank you so much, all of you, for contributing to the feedback circle this week. Thank you to John R. Thank you to Amr. Thank you to Sam Otten for his Blue Sky feedback from Flight Chat last week. Thank you to Alex for his thoughts and feelings and questions as well. And of course, thank you to Jared for your feedback as well. Thank you to everyone for the feedback this week. If you wish to join the feedback circle for the next episode of Flight Chat, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the Flightcast, on Blue Sky at Flightcast. You can comment on the YouTube posting for this particular episode at the Flightcast YouTube channel. There's also the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course that can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.